Okay, John, and I'm recording.
All right, good evening, everyone. We're off to a slow start here with some technical difficulties, but we are now commencing the regular meeting, first of 2022, for the Township of Montclair Planning Board. In accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting a copy of the notice on the first floor of the municipal building, and also by sending a copy to the newspapers designated by the township for notice. Electronic notice of the meeting has been provided by posting a copy of the meeting notice along with access instructions on the township website and also on the main access door of the municipal building. The meeting is being broadcast live on Channel 34 as well as streamed live and also will be available for on demand on YouTube. This meeting is a quasi-judicial proceeding, meaning that the board has powers and procedures resembling a court of law, excuse me, and we are obligated to objectively determine facts and draw conclusions from them in order to provide the basis for official action. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate for a judicial hearing should be maintained at all times. Members of the public are automatically placed on mute until such time as the meeting is open for public questions or comments. And at that time, members will be then of the public will then be unmuted, and they may provide their verbal questions or comments as appropriate, or in the alternative, if that's not possible due to technical difficulties, they can also direct questions and comments to Ms. Talley, the board secretary, via the chat or question and answer functions of the meeting platform, or as a last resort by emailing Ms. Talley at jtalley@Montclair NJUSA. That's one word, montclairnjusa.org. First thing on our agenda this evening is our roll call, and I'm here.
Okay. Vice Chair Brodock is excused. Mr. Cook?
Here.
Mr. Graham?
Here.
Mr. Ian Wally? I see you, Tony.
Here. Sorry, I was muted.
Ms. Lockman? And welcome to our newest member, Kevin Pierre. Are you here? Yep, he raised his hand. Counselor Schlager?
Here.
Ms. Willis?
Here.
And Mr. Jacobson?
I'm here.
We also have Arthur Neese, the board attorney. We have our new board engineer, Marisa Tiberi, here for her first meeting. Marisa's a little bit under the weather. I believe she's got COVID, or she's waiting for her test results. So, she's probably not going to be up to her normal speed this evening, but she said she would join us. And I saw Joe Fishinger's here, and I believe Jerry Giosa as well. Okay. So the next.
Go ahead, Janice.
Yeah, so this is our reorganization meeting. And the first thing that we do as part of the reorganization is get the report of the nominating committee for the selection of the chair, vice chair, secretary, and assistant secretary. So who from the nominating committee is here to report the nominations for the board officers? Robin? I think the mayor's not here, so that leaves you and/or Mr. Cook.
We have not met, and I have nothing to report.
Okay, well, what I would like to do is there anybody who would nominate a board member for the position of chair? Because we need a chairman to run the meeting.
I nominate John Wynn.
I've heard some good things about this guy Wynn. So if nobody objects, I will nominate this unknown fellow to fill a role that has been. I'll nominate John Wynn to be chair.
Okay, Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. How about for the position of vice chair?
I would nominate Keith Braddock.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye, but we should tell him that he wasn't, reappointed because he missed the meeting.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? How about for the position of secretary?
Is that you, Janice?
That's you, Janice, right?
I would nominate Janice Talley.
Is there a second?
Goon is the word we're looking for.
All in favor?
Aye.
Uh,
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? And finally, for the position of assistant secretary, you haven't met him yet, but we have Tommy Sibilia, who is the
Okay.
assistant planner, and he would be filling in when I can't make it.
I nominate
Sounds
Tommy
good.
Sibilia.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, well, congratulations. The next item, I just want to address our subcommittee appointments, which I included in your packet. I don't have it on the screen right now. With the mayor, first of all, does anybody have, because I know we talked about this at the last meeting. We have one opening, and that's for the planning board personnel committee. Right now, it's just John Wynn and Robin Schlager. So I think that there's an opening there. Mr. Pierre is automatically on the nominating committee, so next year he can participate in the process of nominating the board officers. But if anybody wants to make changes, I know we made changes just a couple months ago. But if there's any changes, let me know. And if there's anybody who wants to be on the personnel committee, since the mayor is no longer on the board, there's an opening for one more person.
What does the committee do?
Basically, at the end of the year, we evaluate is the board satisfied with its current personnel? Is there a wish to change personnel or change the terms of our different contracts? So really, it's at the end of the year. That's when they're most active.
Personnel meaning our contractors as well as the staff?
Our professionals, board professionals. We don't have any, I would just say board professionals.
But not you and the secretary?
No, not me.
Secretary. Yeah, no, I'm just,
Yeah.
to be clear. Okay, thank you.
So there's anybody who wants to join that subcommittee? We could leave it with just John and Robin if that's fine. Okay, then I think we'll leave the subcommittees as they are for right now. And that leads us to the next item on our agenda, which are the minutes from the December 13th meeting. And Carmel, I did receive your changes to the minutes, which were distributed to everybody. Are there any other changes to the minutes?
Janice, just quickly before we vote, I wasn't, I watched the meeting. Do I vote on these minutes?
You can if you want. Yeah, since
Okay.
you watched the whole meeting, and I know you sent me the certification, then you can vote on it.
And I agree with Carmel's edits there.
Okay.
Okay.
So is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Up, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Moving right along, because we do have quite a few items on our agenda. I know we've got two resolutions and then the set of resolutions for our board professionals that we do every year. Let me go to.
Janice, has there been any significant changes to the resolutions for the board professionals that we do every year? Or can we assume that
The changes have been really structural into the structure of the resolutions, which was a requirement from the CFO and our new purchasing agent. to the terms of the contracts. The only one that where there's been a significant change, of course, is for the board engineer, because we went the new firm, so there's a whole new structure there. In terms of all of our other board professionals, there were no changes. So our first resolution, and I can pull this up, is 6 Depot Square. And I know we spent a lot of time talking about this. Are there any changes to the resolution for 6 Depot Square? Hearing none. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
I abstain as I wasn't part of all of the hearings.
I believe I have to abstain as well.
Okay. Okay. And then our next resolution is 330 Orange Road. Are there any changes to that resolution?
I
If
move
not,
that we approve it as submitted.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions?
I'm out of this one, Janice.
Okay. Okay. And that brings us to all of the resolutions for our board professionals. I'm not going to pull those up on the screen because there's quite a few of them. And I think we could do these all at once unless anybody wants to do them individually.
I'd like to move that we do them as a group and
I've got some
we approve
questions
them.
on the engineer.
Okay.
The rates are kind of unusual, the labor rates. Is there any insight? For example, to stay at the meeting is $222 per meeting. Project managers are $222 an hour. Since I'm somewhat familiar with rates, I'm just wondering, could you just in a very short way sort of describe how these were competitive with others?
These are at the high end
Okay.
of the others. But for other reasons, the personnel committee felt that they really wanted to switch direction and go with a firm that would serve the township of Montclair, both from the perspective of the board engineer and the other engineers on staff that could review applications, and have a cadre of inspectors that are local and can oversee the inspection process and maintain good communication, which were problems that we had with the previous board engineer.
I
So
mean, a survey analyst making $214 an hour and an LSRP making $222, a project and just a straight up project engineer or senior design engineer over $200 an hour. Quite high.
those are on the high end. And we may have to take a look at our escrow fee schedule when we see how these fees come in.
Mhm.
Are these fees paid by the applicant?
They are.
But is that always the case though? Isn't the always by the applicant?
Yeah.
There's no work that's done for the board itself.
We pay a flat, a fee for per meeting. We also set aside some money in the contract to answer questions or issues that may come up that are unrelated to an application. So there may be an instance where we have to ask the board engineer to look at our stormwater management regulations. But generally, those additional items are done as a separate task. So we know what the budget is for the task and it's not open-ended.
Tony, would you like to
Can you indicate
see the
how,
other submission?
I don't want to take up too much time, I apologize, but how much, can you indicate on a percentage basis the difference between this proposal and others that you considered? Just cost-wise.
I could say the costs are probably 10% higher.
Okay, thank you.
And I have a question about what the site inspector does. I know the site inspector monitors the development of a building, let's say, but does the site inspector come back and make sure that all of the contingencies that were included in the resolution are met?
Generally the way we work on this, it's an effort of both the planning staff and the engineer. Items that are identified in the engineering report, and we work very closely with them. And if it's not identified in the engineering report, they go out there and inspect it. We go out and inspect these items too, but we're not looking for a lot of the engineering details. We're looking for the other details that we have raised in our reports. And so it's a combination. We work together.
So if there's a problem with a contingency that was in a resolution that's not being met, how do you determine that? Is it just by neighbors complaining, or?
Well, you're talking after the if they're not maintaining, if after the certificate of occupancy,
Yes.
then it's by complaint, because we're not monitoring these things after their CO is issued.
Even though there could be things like they weren't supposed to cut down trees and then they go and cut down trees a year later, or they're supposed to have garbage collected during certain hours and they're not collecting it during certain things like that.
There's a lot of items in resolutions that are really beyond our ability to monitor and enforce. If it's brought to our attention, then we can go back after the fact and raise it as a site plan violation. But generally, these things, what holds up these things is we hold up the CO until all of the items in the resolution are addressed.
But sometimes that's not practical because the items in the resolution include other things beyond.
Right, that's always a difficulty, and that's why you have to.
And we've had this discussion before, Carmel, about the fact that there's really a hard burden for the township because of insufficient staffing to continue to police these kind of things. And, the solution is to hire more people.
Well, that's what I was wondering.
and-
You have a site engineer, and I was wondering if that's one of the functions of a site engineer.
Well, not after the fact. I mean, and it's not reasonable to think that after the application is complete, that the engineer is going to be, engaged on it, indefinitely. That's not reasonable.
So is it the planning department that gets the complaint, or is it the town manager?
It's usually code enforcement if code enforcement is property maintenance issues. If a neighbor complains because they know that there was something in a resolution that's not being complied with, then it comes to our office.
Okay, thank you.
So, and I guess in one final word with respect to the fees, again, as we discussed at the last meeting, the committee's thoughts were in terms of trying to address some of the issues that we had seen over the past year. And out of the submissions that we got, we felt that we would give this contractor, this firm, a chance, and that they seem to be very well equipped to give us the kind of service that we were looking for. So we will see excuse me, over the course of the next year, if we get the service that we're anticipating. And, you know, if it's worth paying the premium for it. But we
So-
did not consider the fees excessive.
So are there any other questions about the professional resolutions?
And if not, I'd like to make a motion that we accept all of the resolutions as a group and that we approve them.
Is there a second?
We'll second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. So that brings us to our first application, which is 10 Elm Street. And then we-
Janice, I'm just wondering if we should do bills since we're doing housework.
Okay,
So I move that the bills be accepted.
is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I,
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. So, I believe we have Alan Trembulac here. I'm gonna make Alan a panelist. And who do you want to bring? Alan, you're a panelist now. Let me know who you want me to also make a panelist.
Paul Sionis and Paul Anderson.
Okay. And if you let me know what documents you want me to pull up.
Well, I think first document you can pull up, Janice, is the revised site plan that was submitted by Sionis Architecture. I think it's dated December 21.
Okay, let's see. I don't know. If it's maybe it's this one. Nope, that's not it. Must be it.
That's it.
That's it.
Okay. And I believe this was previously marked.
That would have, is that the most recent? Yes, I think it is. That was submitted after the last meeting, Janice. I don't know if you've
Then let's
added
have
it.
Since A18. I've already marked the Boswell report as A17.
Okay, and this would be A18?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, I assume I can begin, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Okay, well, first of all, good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. For the record, Alan Trembulac appearing on behalf of the applicant AD Holding 10 Elm Street, Inc.
Mr.
This-
Trembulac, I am so sorry. Can I just interrupt for a second? There seems to be a little confusion in my notes concerning the exhibits.
Okay,
And I just want to get it clarified if I can. I have, I think up to A15. Did you pre-mark additional exhibits, Janice?
Well, I have A15 is the Sionis PowerPoint dated November 22nd. I have
Right.
A16 as the Sionis PowerPoint dated December 13th.
which was for identification only.
Right.
Right.
I then marked, but the Boswell report dated December 28th, 21 as A17, and then tonight the revised plan submitted by Sionis Architecture as 818.
And this is revised. Okay.
Janice, were we given a hard copy of the Sionis revised plan?
I did not receive a hard copy of this. I believe this was submitted digitally and presented at the last meeting.
I'm sorry, Janice, on December 22nd, it was delivered to your office from Studio 042.
Okay. All right, then, our fault, my apologies. I don't believe it was sent out in the packages. My secretary didn't include it in the packages.
So we haven't seen what's on the screen now. We haven't seen that before.
It was on the website, but it was not submitted in your package.
But
So what was the email that you sent with the new,
That was the parking sketch.
So that's what I was just going to ask. So this, what's on the screen now does not reflect the further change of so this parking is illustrated here is not correct. Is that right?
No, that's correct. We haven't changed the parking. We did submit a sketch as we were requested to, but we're not adopting that sketch
Oh, okay.
as a plan revision. That was submitted at the request of the board.
Oh, I see. Okay. I thought that was a revision. It just wasn't clear exactly what it was.
No, this is it's my fault. With this one, we neglected to include this in the package.
So there's changes that have been made to this, to the one that we actually saw, if we're only looking at hard copies.
Yeah, I think what happened was I was not in the office December 22nd, and it was not put in my file. That's the problem. So I was not aware that it was, or when it came time to send out the packages, I wasn't aware that it was in the file.
And yet this is only showing 4 EV parking spots, where the earlier one had 5. Is that correct?
No, I believe it's 5.
That's 5
Where's the 5? It's hard to
on the
see.
bottom.
It's one of the handicap spaces must be EV parking, have an
Oh, I
EV
see.
station.
But the other one had 5 across the top, right?
Correct, but as Janice just said, one of the handicap spaces is required by the state to have an EV charging station.
Okay, thank you.
And just so that the record is clear, the sketch that was submitted by Mr. Sionis's office of the parking has not been marked as an exhibit.
Not yet.
I thought Janice indicated that she had marked that A19, or maybe I'm just getting ahead of myself.
You're getting ahead of yourself. I haven't.
Okay. Okay. Are we, do we want to mark that now, Janice, or?
Sure. A19 will be the parking sketch prepared by Sionis. And I believe the date was yesterday,
No.
The 6th.
the 6th. Okay.
And what you have on screen, Janet, this was up on the website.
Yes,
What was it called on the website?
it was called, I think architectural, I'd have to pull it up, architectural drawings with the date of December 21st, 2021. Yeah.
Architectural. Architectural plans.
Right.
Yeah, it was on that was on the first page. It's really the way that when stuff gets uploaded, it doesn't get uploaded. It doesn't appear chronologically. It's just, I guess it's appearing alphabetically.
Right.
So, and depending on how it's labeled.
Yeah, but if you look, you can see the documents the date, the document was uploaded is always on the right-hand side.
Yeah, but we have like 5 documents that were uploaded on the 22nd. And they're on other pages. That's what I was trying to figure out. Which one was this now?
Right.
All right, so Mr. Tremulek.
Yeah, well, what I'd like to do, before we present our final witness, which would be Paul Anderson, our site engineer and professional planner, I wanted to recall Paul Sionis to discuss these revised plans. Fortunately, there are only, I think, maybe 5 or 6 changes, which he can run through pretty quickly. So I'd like Paul to do that. If you could, Paul, just discuss the plan revisions that are reflected on these revised plans prepared by your office dated December 21st.
21st.
Mr. Sionis, you recognize you remain under oath?
I do. Thank you.
Thank you.
As Mr. Tremulek stated, revised drawings dated December 21st are in front of you now. There are several pages of drawings. And as I stated a few minutes ago, 15 copies, paper copies were delivered. Actually, I just looked by Studio 042 to the planning department on the morning of December 23rd. So first drawing on the screen is drawing A101, and this is labeled first floor plan. And there were several revisions made to this first floor plan based on comments made at the previous board meetings. First is that parking stalls 6 through 8, which are on the top side. All of the revisions are bubbled. Those curved lines around certain areas indicate a revision. So those parking stalls 6 through 8 were revised. They were straightened out because there was a pinch point previously in the parking area. A striped line is now shown at the rear of parking stalls 7 and 8, a striped angled line, plus the rear of stalls 38 and 39 on the opposite side of that parking area to clearly define the vehicular drive. As we already talked about, we relocated the EV-ready charging station from the top or the north side of the ground floor to the lower side because the state requires that one of the ADA or barrier-free parking spaces has an EV charging station. So we still have 5 EV-ready stations, but one of them is on the bottom. We eliminated, and I mentioned this at the last meeting, we eliminated the stackers at parking stalls that were previously labeled 50 and 51. So where the cursor is now, those had stackers shown in the first set of drawings. And now we have a total of 49 parking stalls, which equals 44 physical spaces plus an EV credit of 5 for 49 parking stalls. We also revised the striping in the ADA or barrier-free access aisle. So that's the 8-foot wide access aisle between the 2 barrier-free spaces where the cursor is now, so that it's rectangular in shape. And we also called for a rubber wheel stop at the front of the ADA parking stall number 40 to ensure that a parked vehicle would not impede the flow of pedestrian traffic or the path of travel for a pedestrian along that path. We also show the location of the wall-mounted loading zone sign on this plan. Previously, we only showed that location. We only showed that sign on the master signage plan schedule, but now we actually call for it on this site plan, and that's shown at the top of the plan where the cursor is, and the words are bubbled. Additionally, we added removable bollards. So bollards are 6-inch diameter, 36 inches high. These are removable metal bollards that would be placed in recessed receptors within the loading zone so as to eliminate the possibility of 2 things. Number 1 is to prevent a large vehicle pulling in to this loading area and coming into contact with this second floor balcony on that north side. And we also added a detail on this page, which is shown as detail 3/A101, which is a detail of that 6-inch diameter metal bollard that's 36 inches high that can be removed, by the building superintendent, for example. So that's the detail on the top of the page. So back to the ground floor plan. The bollards are to be set 33 feet from the front line of the building. The front line of the building is the front property line. So the first pair of bollards are set in 33 feet from that front line of the building. This 33-foot distance would allow for a large 26-foot box truck to enter, plus a 2-foot lift gate to pull down at the rear, and still allow a minimum of 5 feet behind the lift gate before you get to the public sidewalk. So that's one of the largest vehicles that would pull into this property, in my opinion. This is much larger than the typical UPS or FedEx truck. This would be a moving truck. Next, based on the Boswell engineering memo that we received, in item number 6 in that memo, and I'll go through some of these that affect the architectural plans. The width of the proposed permeable paving in the loading zone is currently shown on the site plan, on the Anderson site plan, as 12 feet, which is the full width of that right-of-way. So in the Boswell engineering memo, it recommends making that loading zone paving area 11 feet, so as to allow a 1-foot setback from the property line, which would eliminate the need for a variance. So the variance request would have been that all driveways are required to be a minimum of 1 foot off of the property line. So if we decrease this permeable paver driveway by 1 foot to 11 foot instead of 12 feet, we would eliminate the variance request. The 1 foot, in my opinion, should be filled with a decorative stone mulch, a minimum of 6 inches deep, installed over a filter fabric. Historically, this entire right-of-way has been asphalt paving. Another change or comment based on the Boswell engineering memo, which is item number 22 in the engineering memo, states that the maximum height of the parking area wall. So if we scroll to the left side of this plan, Janice, so to all the way to the left. Thank you. So we're showing a wall around the rear 10 feet of the parking area, and it was recommended in the Boswell memo to make the maximum height of the wall to be 7 feet, so as to avoid the need for any other variance requests. So we're indicating that the maximum height of this wall will be 7 feet. The Boswell memo, item number 23, asked about the initial planting size of the bearberry ground cover plantings. So at the top left and at the bottom left, just out of the view of the screen, are 2 planting areas we're proposing. If this is to be, this rear 10-foot area is to be open to above, we propose that those are to be planting areas with ground cover and also tall, slender trees. So the question in the Boswell memo was the size of the bearberry ground covers at the time of purchase and at the time of planting. So those would be purchased and planted in 1-gallon containers, and they'd be planted at 18 inches on center. These ground cover grow a maximum of 6 inches tall. They're evergreen. So the purpose is just to spread and fill in that area. And then the last thing on this page from the Boswell memo is that item number 24 suggested a low-rooted ground cover as a substitution for the lawn area. And as I've testified, that lawn area was to be within the space between the property line and the permeable paver walkway just to the west of the loading area. I agree completely. I believe that I will recommend, in lieu of the grass lawn, that a plant called Appalachian sedge, S-E-D-G-E, be planted. It would be installed and purchased at also in 1-gallon containers and planted at 24 inches on center. And what this is, it's a no to low maintenance grass that's native to the East Coast from Maine down to Georgia and west out to Tennessee, but it only grows to a height of 6 inches. and it spreads 12 to 18 inches, and it tolerates both sun and shade. So this would be a superior recommendation over the grass lawn, which the grass lawn would require maintenance and water. And by substituting this ground cover, we would truly have a more of a environmentally friendly property. Okay, next page, please. Drawing A102. On drawing A102, which is the second floor plan, if we could enlarge that to the top of the stairs there, where there's the curved lines or the bubbled areas. To the right. Oh, thank you. So based on the board comments and the questions at the last meeting, we reconfigured the corridor, the trash room, the office, unit 201 and unit 201 and unit 202, so that the office entrance is not accessed from the residential corridor anymore. So you can see that just to the right of the word trash, there's the entry door to this 1,100 square foot office. And this would be in a separate corridor and would not allow the users of this office to have access to the residential corridor. We also revised the entrance to unit 201 to make the entrance to unit 201 within the residential corridor. Also, we showed the bathroom. There was asked about a bathroom in this office, which was not shown on the floor plan previously. So we now show a bathroom with a sink and a toilet within this office space. Also, the sizes of units 201 and 202 were adjusted slightly because of the modifications to the corridor. It's not much. Unit 201 is now 1,810 square feet. It was 1,800 square feet, so it increased by 10 square feet. Unit 202 is now 1,315 square feet. It was 10 square feet larger. So these are pretty minimal changes, but the floor plan works out better to separate the entrance to the office from the residential corridor. Next slide, please. Go to drawing A103, which is the third floor plan. So there are no changes to the third floor plan, the fourth floor plan, or the fifth floor plan. So these next three slides, no changes were made. Okay, this slide, which is drawing A201, which are the front elevation of the building, which is the east, and the bottom is the side or the north elevation. So on this drawing, we show the removable bollards at the loading zone. You can see very small in that, no, to the left of that.
Oh, here?
Yeah, right there. So those are two of the removable bollards that would be placed in that loading zone to prohibit vehicles from entering and driving over that landscaped area, and also from the possibility of encroaching the first balcony. We also added a clearance sign hanging below that unit 201 balcony above the loading zone. So the sign indicates 10-foot 6-inch clearance to the underside of the sign from the ground, and it's a 7¼ inch diameter sign. And we've added that to the building signage master plan schedule, which is in the top right side of this drawing page. And then we stay on this. There was a comment made at the last board meeting that we were proposing inferior exterior materials. So I need to counter that. The building exterior is proposed to be a combination of brick that will be in various patterns to make it interesting, in addition to insulated metal panels that are noted on the drawings as metal composite panels, in addition to large expanses of glass, semi-transparent glass, guardrails on certain balconies, and metal railings on others. This is all done in the purpose of making this an interesting building that we hope kids walking to junior high say, that's pretty cool. So the metal composite insulating panels are a very high-end material. They're more expensive than brick. They're not an inferior material. They're insulated, they're lightweight, and they allow for creating an interesting facade, especially when you combine it with other materials such as the brick and lots of glass. Next slide, please. So drawing A102, these are the rear elevation, which is the west, and then the south elevation. There are no changes to these drawings. And then we go to the next slide, which is drawing SS 101. These are the streetscape drawings. And the only change to this is we added the removable bollards next to the front elevation of the building and the hanging clearance sign that I noted already.
Oh, excuse me, Paul, can I just jump in because it's just on this slide here. When you said early on, you said you changed the wall height. I guess that's in the rear from 10 feet
That's
to
in the
7
rear.
feet? What?
Right. So we did not, it's not shown on the drawing, but we agreed to change the wall height to 7 feet.
What,
On the
yeah,
drawing,
just what wall are you talking about? I was not clear.
Hey, Janice, can we go back one slide, please? Okay, on the west elevation, if we could blow that up, the top drawing.
Okay. So,
that
by lowering the wall, you make more of the parking garage exposed to other properties? Is that fair?
That's fair, correct.
So why is that good, other than avoiding a variance?
It just avoids a variance.
Well, but the criteria shouldn't be, actually, this is a comment. I can go on, I can comment later.
No, it's a good question.
Yeah, because it seems like parking garages aren't the most attractive thing. So having a slightly higher wall may not necessarily be bad just because it avoids a variance. But I don't really have any other perspective in terms of. I was just chasing to try and catch up what was being discussed before.
Okay, so the wall was shown as 10 feet.
Yeah, and that's what's shown here.
Yeah, as measured above grade level.
Okay.
But the suggestion was if we lower the wall height to 7 feet, we would eliminate a variance for the wall height.
It actually wasn't a suggestion. We just called it out that it would need a variance since it exceeds the 7 feet, and that you should provide testimony in support of that variance request.
Okay, we will have our planner testify about the variance request, but thank you. I used the wrong words. I used suggested and it was pointed. You're correct.
So what I'm looking at, the building is set back from that wall. The wall's on the property line, the building is set back?
10 feet back.
Got it. Okay, thanks. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So Paul, is this now your plan of choice, not to have the covered parking areas?
Alan, do you want to discuss that?
Well, I think I think I can address that. I mean, we think it's we would like to have it. We're also trying to minimize the variance relief, but we think it is a good idea, which was suggested in one of the earlier reports, to have the building extend out over what's currently the open parking area, which would trigger a variance for the building setback, because the setback requirement for the building is 10 feet, and we would encroach, but it would only be for the first floor. It would really, I guess, extend about, I don't know, 10 or 12 feet from grade, Paul, and provide a cover or a roof, if you will, and enclose the parking to prevent snow and debris and whatever from entering into that open space. We would like that variance. We don't need it for this project. We think it's a better situation. If the board's inclined to grant the variance, we would prefer that. But if the board's not inclined, so as to not have the first floor of the building encroach into the setback, then we're okay with the plan as submitted with just the variance for parking area setback.
But was the point of having the roof, let's say, not open, the parking spot's not open, was how are you going to deal with snow? And will your engineer address that?
Right, the engineer could discuss that. The driveway, the garage on the interior is sloped towards interior drains, but he will discuss that. I think it's a better plan if that rear area is covered with roofing and terraces that could be accessible from 2 of those second floor units. But as Alan just stated, that requires a variance, and that would become part of the building, and that would be within the 10-foot rear yard setback. And as we've also stated, there's a parking lot directly behind this property, so it's not really affecting the property behind us. if we have a terrace. I also think it's better for building security to cover that with a roof or a terrace.
But this current picture does not include the terrace, is that what we're saying?
That's correct.
And then we would have to go back and discuss the whole snow issue again.
If we have it open like this. And we'll hear that from our civil engineer.
So the parking lot you're talking about is the Elm, 24 Elm parking lot that's behind the building? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
I just want to make sure that I understand what's happening now in your request with regard to the parking spaces specifically. Now that you've reconfigured things this way, can we take a look at the parking slide? Because as I recall, previously you were looking for a one-spot variance, but in addition, you were looking for variances for certain compact spaces and some other length issues. So what now are you asking for? That's not it, Janice. That's what it would look like without variances, I think. The one that we were looking at first, just a few minutes ago. Yes. Or
Well,
I think yes, that one.
That's it.
So if this is what you're doing now, what variances are you looking for now with this?
Alan, do you want to have Paul?
yeah, I can answer that very quickly. There are three variances based upon what we're looking at now. One is for a parking deficiency variance of one space where 49, 50 is required. We have 49. So one parking space deficiency. We need a variance for the tandem spaces that are shown. There's, I guess, 4 sets of tandem spaces that requires a variance. And the third variance would be for the setback in the rear, whether it's for a built parking area setback or building setback, depending on which alternative, I guess, the board thinks is best. And then there's a waiver for the parking space dimensions to allow for compact parking spaces, which are shown on this plan. And I guess there's a waiver, also a small waiver for aisle width, parking aisle width. So 3 variances and 2 waivers.
Since we're on this, can I ask a question? With the way that tandem spaces are, they're going to be assigned to each tandem space is assigned to one family that has 2 cars, correct?
Correct.
Right. So you're assuming that you're going to get a family, you're going to get at least 3 families
Yep.
that have compact cars. And 2 of those families have 2 compact cars. And if you don't have those types of tenants, then the use of these compact tandem spaces, they're not usable. So doesn't that kind of negate or change the parking tally of spaces that you have?
Well, I'll describe compact car spaces. So by Montclair's ordinance, a compact car space must be a minimum of 8 feet wide and 17 feet long.
Right.
17 feet long, by my math, is 204 inches in length. I think I've mentioned this before. I read a lot of car magazines. I'm a car buff. I can't fix a car, but I know cars. Not many cars are more than 198, 200 inches. As I've mentioned to the zoning board, some cars are getting large. There's a new Ford pickup truck that's coming out that's electric. That'll be 19 feet long. So that could not fit into a compact space. But I'd say 90% of the cars that we drive can fit into a compact car space. So I don't see a problem.
Aren't we talking about, Paul, I mean, respectfully, aren't we talking about like a compact car? What can you give us a sense of what types of car we're talking about here? I mean, I'm assuming it's I mean, I have a Corolla. I assume a Corolla falls into that mix. But I mean, if you're going to get anybody with an SUV, forget it, right? And families are going to want an SUV, a van, something for
They're
the
going to at
kids,
least
right?
want one compact and one big car. So big
Right.
and little.
Right.
That's exactly how my family functions, right?
Right. And aren't these 2 and 3 bedroom apartments?
Yeah.
These are 2 and 3 bedroom apartments, correct?
Right.
All of them are.
So, yeah. So, yep.
So those spaces
I
would
mean,
be
I
assigned
think
by the owner.
Carmel's basic point is really kind of undeniable, which is that you are making an assumption that you are going to have at least 2 families fitting a
Three.
particular profile. And if you don't get them, then this is going to end up being problematic. We can debate the probabilities of you having 2 families that meet these criteria, but if you don't, Carmel's right.
Jeff, it's 3. It's 3 out of the 4 tandem slots
That's
have to
correct.
meet
Oh,
that.
you're right.
criteria.
Yeah, sorry, you're right. I'm wrong. It's 3.
You're correct. It's three sets of tandem parking spaces. And those would be assigned to specific tenants.
Can
So
I,
Paul,
can I
what were the dimensions of the compact space that you called out just now?
Well, the township requires a minimum of 8 feet by 17 feet. But as you can see,
In inches?
in inches, 17 is 204 inches. 17 feet.
204 inches deep.
Right, and then the width of 8 feet is 96 inches. The width is not a problem. If you know, most cars are like 66 to 68 inches wide, 5'6" to 6 feet. So that's not a problem. I think the concern is if someone has a SUV, a large SUV, like
Yeah, I mean, an Escalade is a
Navigator.
pretty hefty SUV. That's 211 inches,
Correct.
212 inches long. Okay, but that's at the extreme.
But you're not going to park a Highlander in there either, right? I mean, you're not going to park a basic Toyota SUV in there.
I think, well,
I just looked up my family sedan is between 208 and 215 inches, depending on what my configuration is. So, you know, I wouldn't fit. Maybe I'm a gas guzzling, you know, not good Montclarian, but I'm over by a couple inches.
Well, if I can just add to this conversation, because I looked over the weekend online and seen repeatedly references to the average car length of 14.7 feet. And I'm also looking at something online. I realize this is not in evidence, but talks about a large SUV of 16.7, you know, which would fit within a 17-foot space. But, you know, cars have gotten smaller. I mean, this, you know, definition in this ordinance has been there, I think since 1983. That's almost, what, 40 years? And I think we all can agree that cars have gotten smaller over time. And you know, again, what I've seen referencing the average car length as 14.7 kind of confirms that.
But Alan, I think everybody would be more comfortable if these were full-size tandem spots. I think the concern here is that, you know, look, I understand, you know, the trying to get a little creative and figuring out how to get these spots in there and best utilize the space here. But it does seem like there is going to be some very specific tenants required in order to maximize this space in here. And, you know, we're increasing the density by, you know, a substantial amount in this area. We just want to make sure that the parking situation, that we're not just putting too much into this space. And the parking seems to indicate that maybe we are.
Well, I mean, also, it's hard to anticipate. I mean, you might be right. People could have a lot of large vehicles, but also there could be a lot of, you know, empty spaces in this. You know, we're assuming full capacity based upon, you know, the RSIS requirements, but there could be, you know, an excess of parking spaces also. I know no one really, you know, can say for sure. I'm not sure what the board, you know, would like us to do.
I mean, is there any way to?
Spaces?
Well,
Oh, sorry. I'll go ahead, Ms. Willis.
yeah, I was just going to say that I kind of share the concern about the assumption of 2 compact spaces. I know that I have a small car and my width of my car is a little over 5 feet wide. And if I open the door to get in it, that adds another 2 feet. Assuming that you are going to try to get out of your car once you're in there, you're going to need at least that amount of space. And the person who sits on the passenger side, they open their door, you're already past the 8 feet. So I think that we are kind of squeezing it. And I'd rather have a little more generosity, because I also share the concern that Carmel raised, that the idea of two compact cars being required in order to use the space would mean that some families would have to always take two cars anytime they took a trip, because that you wouldn't have enough, and you'd have no opportunity for the one regular sized car. So that was just my comment I wanted to make.
Well, yeah, I understand all the comments. I mean, we have basically four tandem spaces. Two of them have a compact car and a regular sized car, and then there are two others that have the two compact cars, which from what I'm.
Alan, I think there's 3 that are tandem compact, correct?
No, I think there's two.
The
Oh,
question is,
that
is
spot
this-
11 is a full size? Is that what I'm looking at?
Correct.
Okay.
So that's a combo compact plus full.
Correct.
40 and 42 and 12 are both full, and the other two are 1844 and 1743 are all compact.
Right, those are the ones that, the board's concerned about, as I understand it,
I
that
see.
we might not have. I mean, again, we're gonna have a total of, hopefully, fully occupied building with 22 tenants, and most of the units are 2 and 3 bedroom units. So, I mean,
Well, I have a quick question. If you move the stairs, can you gain an extra foot in length for those compact cars?
Paul?
I'm looking at that. I'm looking at
Yeah.
the floor. I'm looking at the floor plans above.
I mean, I'd like to add to that too. It occurs to me.
If you move the stairs here, you could get a slightly wider, than 8 feet. I don't know.
Great point, Janice. Yeah.
And the other point is, I feel like you need a door near the front of the building for loading and unloading, which doesn't exist. So if you're loading and unloading, you got to run around on the outside and come in through the lobby door. That area that's called, I don't know what it's called, where you're leasing
Display.
You couldn't have a door that went in there to let people load and unload their stuff and go through there rather than on the outside sidewalk?
I think we could look at that.
Because what are these doors really for, where the path is? You expect that people will go that way who are walking and go up the stairs there?
Up the stairs and up the elevator. Is that what?
No, the elevator is in the front. There's only one elevator, right?
Right. Oh, so you're talking about that stairway. That's a fire stair.
Oh, I see. And the other stairs for what?
Just a rear, that's for the utility room for the building super to get in and out of the building from that utility room. That's all.
Huh.
It's also another exit from this first floor plan.
Is it required by fire code or anything?
I believe it is, yes.
If I'm looking again at the compact spaces, and it appears that actually the tandem spaces marked 18 and 44 are not, I mean, it says tandem compact, but the deeper space is 18 feet, which is consistent with the other standard size spaces, and then it's just the other space is 17 feet. So
Yeah, but they're only 8 feet wide. That's too.
okay.
They meet our minimum width. They need to be 9 feet wide.
For full size, correct.
Okay.
I've been giving this project an awful lot of thought since we last were together. I have a couple of thoughts on it, for whatever they're worth. I recognize that this space is zoned for a building of this density. I don't think that the council necessarily had in mind a building like this in that spot. I think that it was a possibly an oversight or a mistake when the zoning was put in, but we are where we are, and so the building is what it is. I keep coming back to a comment I read on Baristanet a few weeks ago that really resonated with me, which is that this is one of a series of buildings, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that this is one of a series of buildings where the developer looks at every jot and tittle of the law and puts together a proposal that gets every possible legal exemption and hands it to the board and says, well, this is what the law allows us to do, so suck it up. And if that's what was happening here, we'd be in one place. But that's not what these folks did. They looked at every jot and tittle. They've got the 5-spot exemption for electric vehicles, and that's still not enough for them, and they're looking for variances that allow them, as Michael very astutely said, to squeeze even more density into an area that I don't know that we're all that comfortable having this much density. So having given this a ridiculous amount of thought over the last few weeks, my conclusion is to vote no on the parking variances and waivers, and recognizing that that's going to require some rethinking of what happens above it. But I have, that's where I've ended up with this. And maybe I'm a lone voice in the wilderness, maybe I'm not, but I think that if we do this with this kind of density, we are opening some doors that we don't really want to open, and I'm not prepared to do it.
Well, okay, the only first thing I would say is you haven't heard the rest of our testimony, but I respect your opinion, and it's consistent with an opinion you expressed early on. However, and I understand there's board members that have concern regarding the size of this building, but as you've already pointed out, it's what's permitted under the zoning. And the density, if we're talking about building density, 22 units is what's permitted under the zoning. And
Only if you can park it, Alan.
well,
Right.
well,
It's only permitted if you can park it.
well, yes, but we can easily reduce the parking requirement by reducing the number of bedrooms, but we're still going to end up with 22 units. They might have larger space and but less bedrooms because the parking is dictated by number of bedrooms. We've already reviewed this, and Paul can discuss it in more detail. But you know, if we're gonna be confined to 46 spaces, and the board's not going to grant any variances, even though I would submit that the variances that are seeking here are minor compared with many other projects where the board has approved much more substantial variances, that it's not going to reduce the size of this building if we have to modify the building to produce a smaller parking requirement. It's just going to allow, where you have to reduce some bedrooms, but you're still going to have the same size building, the same number of apartments, and with a smaller parking demand.
Mhm. If I can ask a question. So speaking of units, there's 22 units, 2 and 3 bedrooms. I don't know the breakdown of the 2 and 3. How many, if everything was at full capacity and there was a person in every bedroom, how many people would be living in this building?
I can answer that. I'll look at the unit layout chart.
Okay. While you're doing that, I would have to concur with Mr. Jacobson that this is a very large building in this space that is really, to me, over the top, even though I know it's allowed. I also, like I expressed in the last meeting, the proximity to the Bullock School of this building and the traffic that flows in and out of Elm Street there is really, I can't possibly see that being a safe area. It's just too much traffic.
If,
And you
if I
have 49 or 46 cars. It's a lot.
If I can just interject for a moment, I think what the board needs to do here is to listen to the balance of the application. There could be additional testimony and additional documents that are put before you. This is not a time, there's no call for a vote, there's no motion for a vote. So I would just request that the board listen to the application and decide the application at the appropriate time.
Okay, so I will answer Robin's question. Based on the plans that have been filed with the 22 dwelling units, 8 of the dwelling units were to have 2 bedrooms each. So that's 16. If there were 1 person in each bedroom, that's 16 people for the 2-bedroom units. And then 14 units had 3 bedrooms, which was 42 bedrooms. So that's a total of 58 bedrooms. So your question was, if there was 1 person in every bedroom, there would be 58 people in this building.
Why would you assume only 1 per bedroom?
That was the question that was asked, if it was 1
Right.
person.
No, the
So-
question that was asked was if it was fully occupied.
Robin, did I misunderstand that?
No, I asked fully occupied.
Okay,
So, but 58 people is assuming 1 person per bedroom.
correct.
So if let's say a couple of, however, a makeup of a couple moved into a 3-bedroom, perhaps they would share a bedroom. There'd be 2 other bedrooms, maybe with 2 relatives or 2 children. So your math, it's higher than 58.
That's the minimum. That's probably the minimum you'd get.
58's the minimum, right? Well, okay. Okay, thank you.
Not to add more confusion to everything, but the site plan, the engineering site plans indicate that there are 10 2-bedroom units and 12 3-bedroom units. And now we're being told that there are 8 2-bedroom units and 14 3-bedroom units. So I think we need some clarity as to what bedroom units we finally have. And then the plans need to be revised, consistent.
Well, I think the engineering plan would need to be revised because I think unless Paul Sionis corrects himself, there are 8 2-bedroom and 14 3-bedroom.
Correct.
Is that correct? So if
That's
the,
correct.
the engineering plans say differently, then they would be corrected to be consistent.
Thank you.
Thank
Just,
you.
I might have misunderstood something. Mr. Sionis has returned to talk about the new plans. What else is coming, Mr. Tremblay?
We have one last witness, our site engineer, who's also going to provide planning testimony.
Sorry, I did not realize that was, so I erred and I apologize.
That's okay.
And Alan, did you want to show the alternate parking sketch that was requested by the planning board?
Sure. I thought that was up before, but maybe
No.
not.
So one week ago, the planning department staff requested that we present a sketch of an alternate parking plan without any waivers or variances. So in order to see what fits on that ground floor. And that is what this plan shows. So in this plan, tandem spaces are eliminated. There are a total of 46 parking stalls. There are 41 physical parking stalls plus a 5-space credit for the 5 EV spaces. And within this plan, there are 26 full-size 9 by 19-foot spaces with a full 24-foot parking aisle as required in the ordinance. And then in addition to that, there were 13 compact spaces on the left side of the drawing that are a minimum of 8 feet by 17 feet with a 21-foot parking aisle as required by the ordinance. So the parking aisle at the full-size stalls is a conforming 24 feet. The parking aisle at the compact stalls is also a conforming 21 feet. And then we also show on the left side, which is the west side, that this plan could have a conforming parking setback of 4 feet from the rear lot line, which came up as a variance item. That even though these stalls would be surrounded by a 7-foot high wall, they could be stepped back by 4 feet as shown in this plan to conform with a 4-foot parking area setback from the property line. The space would not be usable. It's strictly, again, almost like Mr. Inwali asked before, is this variance worth it? We would gain 4 feet of length to these parking spaces rather than, we could have 21-foot parking stalls, which we don't need. Or we could split the difference and add it to the parking aisle and some to the parking space. So this is a plan that was requested by the planning board to show a plan without a waiver or variance request. And this reduces the parking count from 49 to 46.
Mr. Sonis, is this drawn to scale? Because I don't see that stairwell that Janice had referenced earlier.
Yeah,
That
the
could be
stairwell
removed.
is not shown, but the
Right.
stair would be in the same location. The utility rooms would be in that triangular area. We just didn't show that. The emphasis was to see conforming parking stalls and what fits and how many.
Understood. My only question is, if we were to look at the other overlay, the way that it's currently proposed, that stairwell still that Janice had referenced can't be moved is what is still what we're saying, right? That would somehow fit into this picture here.
That would fit into this plan, correct.
Okay.
Hey, Paul, I have a question. With this plan, would it be possible to move that large 7-foot wall so it's closer to the edge of the parking spot, and then you could put some landscaping between the wall and the to kind of soften that edge between this property and the neighbor?
Yes, we could move that 7-foot wall approximately 3 feet in. So it's 4 feet from the property line to the parking space. The wall is approximately 12 inches thick. So we would have 3 feet of landscaping if we move that 7-foot high wall in towards this subject building.
So you could soften that side of the building with a little bit of landscaping there.
Correct, we could.
But isn't that?
I have a question.
I'm sorry, isn't that landscaping inside the building? Isn't that inside the wall? I mean,
No.
what purpose would the landscaping serve on the west side?
It would be to soften the wall, the visibility of the wall from the property to the west.
Oh, so the
Otherwise-
landscaping would be on the other side of the wall.
Yeah, so you don't have essentially a 10-foot wall right on the property line for the
I see.
adjacent to the neighbor.
I see. Thank you.
The neighbor being a parking lot, though.
Right.
Right,
Well,
it's the
you know, it's a
arbor gate.
parking lot, but it's visible from Elm Street or from
Gates-
Elm Street,
Gates.
Gates Avenue.
Gates Avenue.
Yeah, I get you.
Are the 13 compact spaces an entitlement of, without any sort of permission or action by the board, 13 compact spaces?
The compact spaces are at the discretion of the board per the zoning ordinance. So generally, the board has accepted up to 1/3 of the parking spaces in a parking lot such as this to be compact. And we're just about at 1/3 of the total number of spaces.
Could you tandem park some compact spaces behind those full spaces? I'm looking at like 14, 13, and 12, maybe even 11.
That's where the utility rooms are, such as the sprinkler room, the electrical room, the water room. Part of that could be, yes. But
How many would fit in there?
on my one screen, I'm looking at the other floor plan, and it appears that we could fit approximately 3 spaces right where that cursor is, correct?
So you'd be back to the 49, yeah.
Right. But those would be a variance request for the tandem spaces.
You also have the variance request for the 21-foot aisle.
Well, isn't that allowed with the compact spaces?
Are all of these compact? Oh, these are all
Yeah,
compact here.
That's not
Okay.
as compact.
Is there Any opportunity for a K-turn if you get down that compact aisle to get out of there?
Yes, yes.
I'm looking for it.
Okay, so pulling, if someone drove into this parking garage by mistake, which they could not do because they would not have access to it, they could get to where the cursor is, driving straight from where it says 21 feet, pull up against the wall and do a K-turn to get back out. And 21 feet is wide enough for a K-turn.
But Paul, they could have access to it if they were a visitor.
They would be given access as a visitor.
Yeah,
Remember,
yeah,
I
they could.
testified that they'd be given either a key fob or cell phone access with a code.
And they might not know that the parking lot was completely full, so that they'd have to go in and back out or get out. To Ms. Willis's point, you need to be able to get out of this place if it's all full.
Correct.
Because this app that you're talking about that controls access, it's not, is it, this is a question, is it also saying what spots are available?
I do not know if it has that.
And Paul, confirm, where would the tenants and visitors of the office space park?
So as I testified, the tenants for the office space would be assigned parking spaces. So the office has required a minimum of 4 parking spaces, and the office would be assigned 4 specific parking spaces.
But and those 4 spaces are for the office workers and visitors.
Well, visitors would be granted access to the building. There's enough parking to provide access to visitors.
Right.
How do you,
So they are not assigned spaces. The spaces are shared spaces.
No. I
You're
testified.
saying that there are 4 out of the 46 spaces that are physically there, 44 spaces that are physically there.
4
No,
would be
excuse me, it's
assigned.
41 on this diagram. It's 41 spaces on this diagram.
Right, 4 of
And
them
so
would be
that 4
assigned
of those spaces will be assigned to the
office.
office or the business.
Right. And that would be sufficient for the office employees and visitors.
Right, okay, so that leaves 41 minus 4.
Right, and then
Or
I
the-
testified that the applicant stated that he would assign 22 other spaces within this parking area to residents.
Oh, okay,
So 22 spaces would be assigned to residents, at least 1 per unit, plus 4 for the office, which is so that would total 26. So out of
okay,
these-
I've got it, thank you.
So out of these 41 physical spaces, 26 would be assigned.
Okay,
If I could make just a suggestion or in the form of a question or whatever, the most efficient way to plan for parking is not to assign spaces. It's to allow people who need parking, don't overbook the parking or overbook it by 10%. But by assigning each space to a unit, you lose a lot of functionality of parking. Just thought I'd let you guys know that. So I would recommend that you don't assign so that you got a lot more flexibility when people are away.
well,
That's a good suggestion.
I'm not so sure because I don't know what happened if you didn't assign those normal spaces, because a person with a compact car is not necessarily going to park in a compact space otherwise. So I'm a little, if you have the shortage of numbers that we've got, I think I'm not so sure what the answer is, but I'm not so sure free for all works either. So I haven't worked it out, but I don't know that a free for all would work.
It does what, I mean, I do have some historical experience of at least 15 years, specifically in the multifamily industry. It works very well and it's very efficient. So I'm not speaking just as a guess. The issue is that owners have to be very careful that they don't overbook it. Then there's a problem if it's overbooked. But if it's booked appropriately and it works really well and allows for a lot of flexibility within the garage. You know, obviously weekends will be tight when people are home, but I just thought I'd mention that. For what it's
And
worth.
Tony, but the examples that you've dealt with, does it also include a third of the parking as compact spots?
Well, compact work is, my experience is the same with the tandem. Stuff just works itself out. And I think that many of the things that we're commenting on are internal to the operations of the way this building works in a way. I think that how this building interacts with its neighborhood, the traffic, the facade, the setbacks and so forth are probably kind of more important in terms of how we can be impactful. And I don't mean to dismiss what goes on in the building, but it's kind of management's problem.
The only retort I would say to that, Tony, is that, well, the requirement in the zoning is for on-site parking. If they can't provide enough parking and all these estimates are wrong, people have to go and try to park on the street. And there's no parking around here on the street.
But I'm not saying that. I'm saying don't overbook it. Provide the required parking. All I'm saying is that if you look, for example, Space 11 could be vacant for a lot of time. So there's so much more efficient if you allow people to park in an available space. During the day, for example, any sort of shared parking depends on when residents in this building leave to go to work. During the day, there's going to be tons of space for office visitors. There wouldn't, if that space was assigned, Space 11 was assigned 24 hours a day, there'd be no flexibility for the manager to be able to park some extra visitors for office.
But this isn't the plan that we're looking at, right? I'm getting confused about what you're advocating for. Are you advocating now for this parking plan, Paul?
I'm not advocating for one plan or the
No,
other.
Tony,
whether it's the first plan, whether it's the first,
what the applicant wants. Does the applicant want to
sorry.
see this plan, or does the applicant want to see the original plan that had those 6 tandems parking spots?
We prefer the original plan
Okay, and why?
because it works. Your experts have confirmed that it works, and it provides more parking spaces, which, we want more parking spaces on the site because for the reason you just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, if we don't have enough there, then people are going to have to utilize off-site parking. So the tandem spaces work. Your experts have confirmed that they can work here. The board just approved tandem parking spaces early this evening for the 6 Depot Square application. The theory being there, we wanted to get as much parking on site as we could. So that same philosophy applies here. We need some variances and waivers, but they're very, very minor. And they're variances and waivers that this board routinely approves for compact spaces, in my experience. We're 1 parking space deficient, which is pretty darn good compared to a lot of other applications that this board sees. So, we like the original plan, which again has been reviewed by your parking expert, who has endorsed it as being reasonable and workable. And it provides the most parking on site, which is a benefit, to the community. And,
to be clear, though, if you had no waivers or variances, you would end up with this alternative plan, but it would require you to make changes to the apartments because this would not be a sufficient number of spaces with the apartments as you've currently laid them out, correct?
That's correct. We'd have to reconfigure apartments and eliminate bedrooms, but not result in any significant, if any, reduction in the size of the building. So I'm not sure really what is accomplished by that. When we can safely accommodate 49 cars, as per the plan that we've presented and that have been essentially approved by your experts. And again, what we're proposing with respect to compact spaces, somewhat reduced aisle width, and tandem spaces are all things that this board has approved on many, many projects. I can't think of any project that I've been involved in, at least, where the board refused to allow compact parking spaces or slight deviations in aisle width, particularly when you're dealing with a building such as this, where most of the people utilizing this building are going to be tenants who are going to be very familiar with how the garage operates and where there might be a little bit of a tight space here or there. You're not going to have a lot of people coming in and out from the public who are not going to be familiar with this. And that was also pointed out, I think, by Mr. Giosa in his report, why it works here, why it's worked on so many other projects in town, with the philosophy of getting as much parking as the site can reasonably accommodate, because the more parking we can accommodate on site, the less parking that needs to be accommodated off site that has a negative impact on the adjacent community.
Alan, I just want to point out, I think there's a difference between parking, adaptive reuse of an existing building where you have the restrictions created by the existing building footprint, and 100% new construction. I just want to point that out.
Okay.
And I will also point out to you, Alan, that we hear all of our applications on a case-by-case basis.
Sure.
And we take a lot of different things into consideration in making our determinations. And, you're not really comparing apples to apples when you start looking at all the different applications that we see. So, to be fair.
Agreed.
And there's more things wrong with this application than just the parking.
Such as what? If we can
Well, what
address that head on.
what I would like to do, what I would propose that we do is it's 9:14. All right. We have another application on this evening's agenda. I don't really think that we're going to get to that application, given that we have at least one more witness and some further discussion to go on about this. So I would suggest that we let that application be carried and free up the evening for the applicant and their witnesses.
Okay, should I bring on Mr. Skolnick, the attorney for the other application, so we can confirm a date?
Yes.
Okay.
He just put it in the chat that he wanted you to make the usual announcements, which I take as consent, but.
Yeah,
Rick,
we'll make the usual announcements about it being carried. The date that we're talking about is when, Janice?
January 24th.
And Mr. Skolnick, do you have a problem with that? I guess you're having problems getting in also, but I do see your chat.
Yeah, if you could confirm in the chat if you can't turn your microphone. If you can't turn your microphone on. So he says that's fine. Please instruct the public to go to the website for the new login information for the meeting on January 24th.
And Mr. Skolnick, you'll consent to any waivers regarding time limits and such that we might need in order to carry this?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, great.
Can you see me? I wanted to test out my new light.
I can't see you, but I do see your yes in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so this will be carried, Janice, until
January 24th.
and there'll be no further notices. That will be so posted on the town website. Good evening, Mr. Skolnick, to you and your clients.
Okay, thank you.
Next, I would like to propose that we take a 5-minute break. And Mr. When we come back from the break, we'll see if there are any further questions regarding Mr. Sionis's testimony, and if anyone from the public has any questions with respect to Mr. Sionis's testimony. And then we would like to hear from Mr. Tremulek's final witness, so that we can get all of the applicant's case on the record, so that we can consider the full record going forward. All right?
Can I ask you a question, John? So
Sure.
if we get through Mr. Anderson's testimony tonight, then the expectation usually is that we would discuss and vote on the application.
We
that-
don't have to vote
Okay.
on it this evening if we
That's
don't
what
have
I'd
enough
like to
time.
say. I'd
If we
like to
don't have
say-
enough time, you
Right.
know.
Okay, I'd like to
and-
say that, plus we don't have the most recent drawings that Mr. Sionis gave us.
But, you know, we want to get all the information on the record and get as much done as we can.
Okay, and my second
and-
point is I'd like to see samples, and I had said this before, of the facade of the building, if that could be at the planning department, so we could look at that.
Okay, well, we can deal with that also.
Okay, thank you.
All right, everyone, 5 minutes. Mr. Tremulak, did you have any further questions that you wanted to ask of Mr. Sionis?
No, I don't, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. And members of the board, are there any more questions that you want to ask of Mr. Sionis before we open the floor to the public?
Yes, there are.
Okay, please go.
Okay, I wanted to ask about I missed it. I didn't quite understand what the change was that you were making with regard to access to the business on the second floor. You mentioned that you were changing the hallway. Could you give me a little more clarification on what's happening with the hallway on the second floor for the business?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. At the last meeting, we showed a plan where the access to the office would be through the residential corridor. In other words, someone would take the elevator, enter the lobby, and open the door into the residential corridor, and then open a door into the office. So there was no separation between the office entry and the residential corridor. So we revised the plan so that there is an entry door to the office. As you can see right where that cursor is, that's the entry door to the office. And then there's a separate door that separates the residential corridor from this front public lobby / corridor. So that's the change that we made. Do you understand that?
When a person enters the building,
Yes,
then they can go straight on the elevator up to the second floor.
correct.
And there's a stairway that they can get out if the elevator was a fire or whatever. How does that work? Is it,
Right,
it's,
so that stairway is right to the right of where the cursor is. So someone could take that stairway to get down and out of the building.
so that they can come in the elevator, get straight to the second floor into the office without any interference or interruption or any need for any sort of special permission?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just since we're looking at that, one more question. So if I'm looking at this correctly, the people in the office can't empty their trash in that trash container because they'd have to go into the residential corridor?
They could not, they would have to handle the trash on their own. And there's a trash room on the ground floor level.
So they'd have to bring the trash to the ground floor level?
Right.
Okay. And the parcel room is locked?
Parcel room is locked and it's accessible by the residents or by a key fob or access to delivery personnel such as FedEx, UPS, USPS. So they would have access to that room.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
I think you made reference a couple of times to a building manager.
Yes.
Is there plans for a building manager to live in the building or somebody that comes every day? Do you know?
No, there are plans on third floor plan is a building manager's office. So on the drawing A103, there's a building manager's office. So the plan is not for the manager to live in this building, to my knowledge. The plan is just for the manager to have an office in this building.
So we don't know if he'll be there Monday through Friday. And we don't know what the deal is on weekends. So
I do not know.
sure. Oh, I understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Sionis, you had talked about the, you put it as a recommendation with respect to changing the lawn to a that was shown on the, for lack of shorthand way to put it, on the Bloomfield Avenue side of the building. Putting a lawn, instead of grass, having a type of low grass that won't require as much maintenance. Is that notation on the plan, or is that
No.
something that is just a response to recommendation?
That is a response to the engineer's memo.
Okay, so that's what you intend to do, and so the plan would have to be updated for that, right?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, does anybody in the public in attendance have any questions of Mr. Sionis concerning what he's testified to this evening?
If you can, I think with this new system, you can raise your hand if you want me to unmute you. Otherwise, I have to unmute you individually one at a time. So
Do you know where they find the raise your hand button?
yeah, and I'm going through and I'm requesting each one of you to, I've requested each of you to be unmuted. Okay, Mr. Schwartz. Mr. Clark, do you have a question?
Just confirming again that the public will have a time to respond generally to this applicant. It's what I asked at the last meeting too. I don't want to suddenly miss my opportunity to speak, but I don't have any questions for Mr. Sionis.
Right at the end of the discussion, at the end of the evidence and the hearing, there will be an opportunity for public comment about the application in general.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
And I believe Mr. Schwartz is unmuted. Martin, it looks like you can speak. Oh, you just muted yourself again.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Ah, good. Okay. 1 second. I have to jump back from screens. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Sionis.
Good evening, Mr. Schwartz.
Members of the board. Paul, relating to your testimony tonight, can you describe how much of the building as is proposed is brick? What percentage is brick? What percentage is glass? And what percentage of the exterior are those composite metal pieces that you described?
Okay, I cannot give you the percentages. I do not have that math. But I could tell you, looking at the elevations, the rear west elevation is at least 95% brick. The south elevation is approximately 60 to 75% brick. Front elevation is probably 10% brick at the ground floor level. The rest is glass and insulated metal panels with brick set back towards the away from that front facade. And then the north elevation facing Bloomfield Avenue, as you can see from the elevations, is at least 50 to 60% brick. And then the rest is either glass or insulated metal panels, or, as I said, the semi-transparent glass balcony walls.
Are those composite metal panels proposed and the glass walls, which I'm not clear about, are they the same types as we've seen in any other buildings? Do they exist on, say, Valley and Bloom, Montclair 2, or any other new build construction seen downtown?
And in my opinion, they have not. These are, as I said, it's a high-end insulated metal panel that's a sandwich with metal on both sides of the panel, and then an insulation material within that sandwich. So we have not seen that here.
Okay, so would it be fair to say that the overall design of the building, as you've proposed, has a modernist feel, not a classical or traditional design?
I believe it has an eclectic feel. So part of it is what you may call contemporary, part of the front facade. The brick is very traditional. We use very traditional brick detailing on the major part of the facades with the brick, with different brick patterns. We specifically did cutouts at the top of the front facade with, to have a glass wall so that people from the sidewalk and the streets below could look up and see that planting on that top of that fourth floor. So in my opinion, it's it's eclectic. The brick is traditional. Some of the metal panels are more contemporary, and the glass areas are more contemporary.
Given your description as eclectic and not really modernist, aren't the buildings right across the street, both catty corner and right nearby, all traditional brick structures, both the commercial and residential buildings? Yes or no?
The original buildings are all traditional, correct?
Is not the building directly across the street, the classical historic Lackawanna Plaza site, which uses traditional architecture and must be maintained under the historic preservation ordinances? Yes or no?
The Lackawanna Plaza site there's the bank, correct? And then there's the original train station.
Yeah, I'm talking about the train station right across the street, effectively.
That's fair. Yes, that's a historic building. Yes.
And would you say, isn't it the actual approved zoning plan by this board that was approved in conjunction with this building and now allowed by the courts after ruling, a new build classical reproduction design of 3 stories only for that development that runs along the street along Grove to Glenridge Avenue? Isn't that the existing approval for this neighborhood, 3 stories, effectively with a traditional reproduction classical residential design? Isn't that correct?
I have not.
You understand the question, Paul? What are you referring to, the Lackawanna?
I'm referring to the approved plan across the street running from Grove to Glenridge Avenue for the new buildings that have not been built yet, but were the approved neighborhood plan by this board.
Approved in connection with the Lackawanna project across the
Correct.
street, right?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
What would that have to do with this project?
Isn't it right across the street and in the direct neighborhood? That's all. That was the only question. That is what was approved for the neighborhood.
It was it was approved for the Lackawanna project.
But it
Lackawanna
comprises the
property. I
immediate
mean, you said
area and neighborhood. Would that not be a fair statement?
it would not be a fair statement. It
Well,
was an approval relating to the Lackawanna project property. It was
isn't
not.
that right across the street?
It's across the street, but
Yes,
we have
it's
an
across the
Exxon
street.
station between the properties, but that doesn't have any bearing on this property. Are you
Sir,
saying
you're
it was bound?
Mr. Trembulac, my good friend, you're interrupting my testimony with
Okay.
commentary. I'm questioning the witness. Please allow me to question the witness.
Okay.
You've had your turn.
I wanted to
Allow
make
me-
sure the witness and I were both understanding the question, so.
Let's do that again. The buildings approved in the neighborhood, which is across the street on Bloomfield Avenue, running from Bloomfield on Grove to Glenridge Avenue, is a traditional reproduction classical design running from along Grove from Bloomfield Avenue to Glenridge Avenue. It's a simple yes or no question that I asked of the witness.
And my only comment before he answers, and then I'll shut up, is Paul, are you familiar with what's been approved for Lackawanna?
Not at all. I have no familiarity with that. I tried to stay away from it.
All right, let's come back to you, Paul.
Thank you.
In your opinion, then, would not the eclectic modernist structure as proposed with its glass and metal exterior skin design be thus effectively out of character for all of the traditional and classical buildings in the immediate surrounding neighborhood to this project?
No, in my opinion, no. We've put the brick where it's up against the brick to the rear on Gates Avenue. We don't know what's going to happen to the gas station property. It was for sale last year. Anything could be built there. The across the street on Elm Street, on the east side of Elm Street, there is the building that I described as built in the 1800s. The and I'm looking at my slides here. The 11 Elm, which is the multifamily residence that was built in the 1800s. That is traditional. The Bullock School is, in my opinion, eclectic. It's got curved walls, but it's a brick and glass. It's not very traditional, but it fits in with the neighborhood, in my opinion. The restaurant and gym on Elm Street, that has been there probably 100 years. It is what it is. Arbor Gate, that was a adaptive reuse project, as I testified. That was the old Chevrolet dealership that was adapted into 30 units. So they, I think they did a nice job working with that, but that was a very large property where they were able to have parking on site in an outdoor parking lot off of Gates.
Yes, but in the immediate area right there, the buildings surrounding are effectively you've testified this. The immediate setting are more traditional and classic brick structures, both commercial and residential. You've already said yes to this.
Well, the gas station, that's its own animal.
Obviously.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
We don't need to belabor the
I see
point.
where you're going. Okay.
I'm done. I'm sure the board wants to move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Martin.
Any other questions from the public? Looks clear, Janice?
Yeah, I didn't see any more hands.
Okay. Mr. Tremulak, next witness.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you. My next witness is Paul Anderson, who hopefully is out there on the line.
I am.
Paul?
I'm here, Alan.
Right. Okay. I think you're going to be sworn in by the board attorney.
Good afternoon, I guess good evening, Mr. Anderson.
Good evening.
Do you solemnly
Good evening.
swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
Paul W. Anderson, Anderson, and I'm the principal with Anderson Consulting Services.
Okay. Sorry, and the address is the same as is on your plan set?
Yes, 40 Miller Drive in Boonton, New Jersey.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Anderson, would you start by summarizing your professional qualification and educational background for the board?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Clarkson University in 1983. I've been licensed as a professional engineer in the state of New Jersey and New York. New Jersey from 1988 on. That license is still current, in good standing. I am a licensed professional planner by examination. Approximately 12 years ago, that license is also in good standing. I've been accepted as an expert witness in engineering and planning from numerous boards throughout the state of New Jersey, including this board previously.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'm offering Mr. Anderson as professional, for testimony as professional engineer and professional planner consistent with his qualifications.
We'll accept it.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman.
All right, Paul, you prepared the site plan drawings that were submitted with this application along with the plans prepared by Mr. Sionis's office, correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay. What I'd like you to do, because a lot of the site plan details have already been addressed in Mr. Sionis's testimony. So I think I'd like you to focus on two things this evening, and feel free to add to this if you feel it's necessary based on, some of the testimony you've heard. But if you could first talk about the drainage and stormwater management that's been proposed for this site.
Yes, if Janice would be kind enough to put up the utility plan as part of my set.
Okay, which is,
SP4.
which plan do you see do you see on the board all of the exhibits that I received?
Yeah, I can't really read it. It's too small for me, but
You have to blow it up. It's hard.
Oh, I don't think let's see. I don't think I can blow this up.
probably at the bottom of the list. Oh, wait a minute, that's 614.
Yeah,
That's an old,
you want the full set. I have the full set dated November 8th.
yes, that one, please.
Okay.
And if I could go to SP4.
Okay. And which page is that?
The fourth sheet, I believe.
Yes, P4.
All right, so property is 0.41 acres. It's in the C1 town center zone. And as we've been going over, the majority of the property will be covered by building. That leaves discussion for site improvements fairly minimal, including the utility design. The project will have all new utility services to the building for sewer, water, and gas. And in terms of the stormwater management, the project, by Montclair's definition, is a major stormwater project. And it has to meet the requirements of the Montclair ordinance for a major project, which includes groundwater recharge, water quality, and rate of discharge. The majority of the runoff coming from this property is from a roof, from the roof of the building. That roof actually is enhanced with plantings as a green roof for part of it. And so there is some water quality elements associated with that, although it is on the roof itself. It's not necessary up there, but it does wonders for reducing the heat island effect and so forth. So it's very beneficial. The water is collected in the roof drains and discharged down into an underground piping system, which recharges into the ground. There's also a few inlets in the garage that pick up floor drains from the garage, but there isn't a significant amount of runoff in the garage, being that the roof is over top. That water is recharged into the ground and also has a positive discharge out to Elm Street. We've managed to reduce the rates below what is required by the stormwater ordinance. So we meet the volumetric requirements in terms of the rate of discharge. In terms of the stormwater recharge into the ground, we recharge almost the entire 2-year storm into the ground, meeting that requirement. And the water quality is met by recharging, by having just the roof water going in. It doesn't really have a pollutant effect that I have to pick up. The side of the building, the 12-foot on the 12-foot space on the north side of the building, which is part of the access easement, which was previously discussed, is the first part of it is the loading dock area that Paul was going over before, directly adjacent to Elm Street. And that has pervious pavement in it. And then the sidewalk that goes from there to the back, plus the planted area that Paul was substituting plants on earlier this evening. That area will absorb into the ground. It has porous pavement on the walkway. And so it's been designed with many green technologies to improve water quality, from the green roof to the pervious pavement. In the Boswell engineering report, there's a comment about not wanting the porous pavement in the loading area, and we can eliminate that in terms of the water. The design criteria I did not count those as pervious areas, even though they're pervious surfaces. I counted them as regular asphalt in terms of surface conditions and permeability. So it won't change the sizing of the system at all, if that's what she would like to do. So that is the first item, I believe. Alan, the other item you want me to discuss is the lighting.
Yeah, just
Which
before
is-
you go on to that, Paul, I think I'm going to come back to the Boswell report later, but
Yes.
Section 14 of that report has, I think, maybe 7 or 8 comments regarding stormwater or the drainage design. Are you able to comply with all of those comments?
Yes, in fact, I mean, I will be coming back to, I could come back to the Boswell, but based on the testimony of Paul Sionis earlier, he basically covered what were the open issues and addressed how we would approach and agree to resolve or those comments. And we have no other issues in terms of that report. We will comply with all of the other items listed in the report. There's no other things that have to be covered.
Okay.
Except for the lighting, which we'll
Yeah,
go over.
which is the next thing I wanted to ask, if you could discuss the lighting plan and in the course of reviewing that, you could discuss the comment in the Boswell report relating to the lighting intensity.
I will.
We start on lighting. I just have a question about water.
Sure,
Okay.
go ahead.
And also the roof. What percentage of the roof is a green roof?
It's just the front portion of the roof. I haven't included in any computations in terms of, reducing flow. But it is there, it's approximately the 2/3 of the front of the building, which is all going to have containerized plantings. It's not going to be earth on the roof itself. It's going to be containerized plantings that I believe Paul has discussed at one previous meeting.
Okay. And the second question is, are you aware and have you tested for the underground streams that seem to be around that area? Like, for example, Lackawanna Plaza has a stream that runs through it. And what effect will that have on flooding and water in general?
Well, we do have to do some soil testing with regard to the permeability, at which point we will find out what, whether there's any conditions about underground streams.
So you have not done that yet.
Normally when you see, when there's an underground stream on site and there's a building, an existing building occupying the majority of that site, you see it in the building, and we haven't seen any cracking or subsidence in the building associated with underground streams. That doesn't mean it's impossible, that it's not already there, but it's probably not likely that there's an underground
But
stream.
it's also a much bigger building that you're building, that you hope to build, which would have a different effect from a weight point of view, if nothing else, on the soil and on the, I would imagine it's very different.
That's true. Well, it's fairly standard it is standard to have geotechnical studies done once the existing building is gone, to understand what the foundation conditions are or what the foundation design parameters would be. And they would be designed appropriately in accordance with all the building codes for a structure of the size we're proposing.
So would that be something that you would add to your civil drawings, that we would see if there were any underground streams that run through?
It's not typically something we would submit to the board. It's something we certainly want to know. It would probably be something that we'd have to reveal to the construction department with building plans. If there was some kind of intercept of an underground stream.
That would affect your discharging into the ground, wouldn't it, if there were streams there?
Yeah, in that case, I would probably have to find some other way to deal with it. But as I indicated, I wouldn't believe that that is a likely scenario.
Isn't
Well,
that
I'll just
something,
tell you.
Paul, that you'd have to present the soil test results to the board engineer and have her confirm
Yeah.
that there aren't
And
any?
well, typically for any groundwater recharge system in any town, not just Montclair, we were obligated to do a soil test to show permeability of the soil itself. And in that process, we dig a hole approximately 10 feet in the ground and we note where seasonal high groundwater is. And we can tell from discoloration in the soil whether it comes up to near the surface, and we certainly will report any water filling the excavation.
I'm just going to put that to you because there are streams in the area. We have a new engineer. She may not be aware of that. So as you said, it's something you will test for. The other thing is you're right next to a gas station. Are you going to do any kind of environmental testing to make sure there's been no leakage in the tanks at the gas station that leach onto this property?
I can answer that. Paul, I don't think you have that. I can answer that, Ms. Lachlan. My client has done environmental tests as part of his due diligence under his contract to purchase the property. And
okay, there's no leakage from the gas station.
we haven't, that did not reveal any environmental concerns that would affect this project. If they had, I don't think we'd be here tonight. So,
Okay, thank you.
yep.
Should we move on to lighting?
Yes.
Okay. We could have the lighting plans, Janice, please.
What sheet is that?
Sheet 5.
Okay. Bear with me, my computer's a little slow.
Yeah.
I tried to close, this is a really big file.
Yes, unfortunately, it's not just your computer, the file.
There we go.
While
so-
we're waiting, Mr. Trembleak, did the environmental reports show anything of any consequence? Not just any plume from the underground storage tanks for gasoline at the gas station, but did the reports reveal anything other that should be of concern to the board?
I don't believe so. I mean, I don't have the report with me. And I also can't say that I'm familiar with everything in the report other than that it was satisfactory, did not reveal anything problematic.
Is that something that our engineer should also look at? The environmental report?
The board could request that the applicant submit it.
I mean, I would be curious. You have an auto, whatever it was doing, that boring auto parts thing, and you have a gas station right next door. So it would seem to me it might be, and you had a car dealership next door. Strikes me there could be some issues at this site. Maybe they've been addressed. I'd just like to know. And I think that in due diligence, it makes sense to have a look-see at that.
Well, the board can request that information, that report, and, we have an environmental department that can review that report, and I can notify the board of any concerns or red flags.
Yeah, I'll leave it up to Janice if you think that's appropriate.
I certainly think that if the board is concerned about that, we could certainly ask the applicant to submit those documents and have Marisa review them. That would be a condition of the approval if you so just if it is approved.
Thank you.
All right. So the comment basically is that the lighting plan exceeds the amount of light at the property line. The area of our lighting plan is to provide exterior lights on the building on the 12-foot area where the loading area is and the walkway and planted area. There's really only a few places right at the property line where it exceeds by a few tenths of a foot candle. And we certainly can revise that. However, we're next to a gas station, which is extremely well lit. And it really is, it seems unnecessary to do that. But if that's what the board wants, we can certainly, revise the plan with regard to the 3A fixtures that are seen here on the drawing so that it cuts it back down an additional few tenths of a foot candle. The other one other comment that was in the Boswell report that does need to be addressed is the removal limits of the fence. We do remove the fence on the western property line, but not on the northern property line by the gas station. That's the gas station's fence, and we'll leave it in place. And I hope that addresses that issue.
Anything else you need to say about the lighting plan, or is that?
No, I mean the interior. Most of the lighting is on the interior of the building, which is a parking garage, so it's not really part of the site plan. My lighting plan only covers the outside. It's really de minimis, and it's really just for walkway lighting, and it can be reduced. So if that's the board's preference, we'll be happy to do that.
Okay.
I don't know this, but is there lighting above the driveway to the garage entrance? So that would go on as a car comes out, that a pedestrian might see that at nighttime, or how does that work?
That's in the building plans. I mean, I'm sure Paul can
Oh,
go
okay.
over that, but it's typically what you'd have, some kind of entrance lighting when the garage door opens.
I have
Okay.
a question. So the exterior lighting is only on the east side,
I believe it's the north side.
or the north side?
Yeah, on the 12-foot strip, yes.
So there's no other lighting in the back where the parking lot extends further out, or on the south side?
Now that's all interior to the building, in the roof or ceiling of the garage structure.
And also the south side butts up
Off by the
against the,
retaining wall in the back.
and doesn't the south side of the building butt up against the building on the adjacent property, Paul?
Yes, it does. So it's all the other lighting is internal to the building.
Okay. So, you also prepared some additional exhibits in response to
I did.
comments that were raised in the report, I think, from the board's traffic engineer.
Correct.
Take them one at a time.
So
and
I have the first
hopefully
one,
pull it.
Janice, is a site plan exhibit that was in Paul Sionis's last PowerPoint presentation, slide number 59.
Okay.
It might be separate too, but that's where I know it is.
So let me give you a moment. I'll pull up slide 59.
Okay. Okay. So the purpose of this slide is really just because there was a question about showing the turning radius for a vehicle into the loading zone. So what we've done is shown how we envision a moving truck, single unit vehicle. The one that we used is a 30-foot long vehicle. And you heard Paul Sionis testify earlier this evening that he envisioned 24 feet being the max. So this vehicle is a little bit bigger than that. And we've demonstrated how that vehicle gets into the parking, into the loading zone. As it would get out, it would actually back out from that loading zone into the traffic and then head back south on Elm Street. So I believe that it's sufficient access and turning ability from Elm Street into the loading zone itself. And the width of the loading zone at 12 feet or 11 feet is really inconsequential, particularly since the recommended surface that Paul was talking about is like a river stone or edge for the 1 foot between the loading zone and the fence on the gas station property.
Paul, this is Joe Fishinger from Brightview. While you're on the loading dock, did you say the truck would then be backing out onto the street? Is there anyone to watch for traffic, or how does a box truck or a small moving truck back out into traffic without, how are they going to know if somebody's coming or not?
Well, a lot of them have, the noise that they make when they back up. So in terms of pedestrians coming, they'll certainly hear the truck backing up, and they'll just have to back out like they would normally back out of a space. In this case, it's a signalized intersection, and there'll be gaps in the signal where they'll be able to back out when there shouldn't be any oncoming cars.
Have you considered, when you answer that question, are you considering that you're next door to an elementary school?
Well, in fairness, next door to an elementary school? You mean the Bullock School?
Yes, Mr. Trembulac, I mean the Bullock School. And I wasn't addressing you, but if you want to put in some more argument, go right ahead.
Well, but you said right next to the, it's not, the Bullock School is, if I'm not mistaken, a block away.
But there's school buses. There's lots of school buses that come down that street.
And kids are walking there, and they, if you're taking issue with my use of the words next to, go right ahead. But it is in close proximity to an elementary school. So let me ask the question again.
Okay.
Did you take account when you were just discussing about the backup noise and the beep beep that you are in proximity to an elementary school? Period.
Yes, I understand it. It's in close proximity to an elementary school. We're also talking about 22 apartments that will be moved into and out of maybe once a year. So the frequency of something like this happening is extremely infrequent.
Well, deliveries are more frequent.
During the
the trucks are not just move in and move out.
Yeah,
there's a lot of trucks that are going to come in and out of here.
For what, UPS and
UPS,
FedEx?
Fresh Direct, water deliveries. I mean, you can.
Amazon.
The list is endless. Amazon,
Fresh food,
U.S.
fresh
Mail.
meals. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I mean, there is a lot of potential deliveries, but the delivery times for major trucks of back out would be the limited times. The Amazon trucks, which are smaller vehicles, will have to back out like they normally do, but you got to look at the timing associated with the deliveries also. And I don't think that when kids are going to school, you're seeing many deliveries of that type. So I believe the loading space does work, and obviously caution has to be maintained with any loading zone. There's just going to be somebody around that's going to be impacted.
Are there mirrors? And I mean, I think there's flashing lights for when the main garage is open. Are there flashing lights, warnings, anything associated with the loading zone?
They can be. They're not currently planned, but they certainly can be.
Can I ask a question? So right next to the beginning of the loading zone on the right side, is there a fence there?
Yes.
So right on the right side of that fence, there's just a little bit of land before the exit of the gas station happens, the driveway to the gas station.
Correct.
So I don't know how the person backing out can see a car that's coming out of the gas station. You know, that could be problematic.
Well, there's always a potential for problems in driving. The fact is, as indicated by your traffic engineer, this is a low intensity traffic use. And it is probably best, this site is best suited for a use like this because of the intensity of traffic from this property. So
Well,
in
you're
terms
not
of
answering my
what is
question. I think
no,
the
what,
intensity that you haven't even talked about and hasn't been addressed by your traffic or parking consultant is the fact that you should have taken into account all the deliveries that will be taking place and that the delivery world is expanding exponentially. So I haven't heard anybody talk about statistics to do with deliveries to residential areas, to a site like this. I mean, you're just kind of taking it for granted that they're going to back in, they're going to back out. That's not going to happen, in my view. They're going to pull up in front of the place. They're not going to use this loading dock, and they're going to block traffic. They're going to block people coming out of the driveway. That's what Amazon trucks do. We see it all over town, and that's the reality.
Okay.
Anyway, but my question was, there's a fence there on the right side of the loading dock. Maybe 6 feet more after that, there's the driveway from the gas station. And it strikes me with those two things in proximity is a problem. And then the other thing is that gas station has a food store, which I'm sure people walk on Elm Street, cut across to get to the food store there. So I don't think that these kinds of things has been taken into consideration to give a credible analysis of what this situation for this site is like. So I don't mean to lecture, but.
Okay. Geometrically, there is sufficient space for the loading space and the traffic. Vehicles can get in and get out of it. And there's measures that can be taken so that it can be done safely, whether it be backup lights or some kind of warning siren or something incorporated into it. As I was starting to mention, this is the lowest intensity use and that would be appropriate for the site. And if you had a more intense use, you would just have more Amazon deliveries and other material deliveries if it was more of a retail establishment. So I do think that, you know, based on the board's professionals' opinion on your traffic engineer indicated this. So
Well,
I think this is the best solution to have a geometrically appropriate space with the least intense use.
Paul, again, this is Joe Fishinger. Is there, I'm guessing it has to do with building configuration, but I'll ask the question, why does the truck have to pull in and back out? Traditionally, in loading areas like this, we see the truck backing in when they pull up to the road. They'll stop traffic when they're going because they stop and then back into this loading dock and then can pull out and obviously see what's in front of them. Why isn't the site configured with a more traditional back-in loading area?
You can back in with certain vehicles. With the vehicle that I have there, the 30-foot box, it doesn't, it has to be from the northbound lane on Elm. This is a larger vehicle. But for things like Amazon and other smaller deliveries, they can certainly back in, just like you're suggesting.
And then how does the queue on Elm Street from the traffic signal affect the ability of this truck to back out? If you just said that a truck backing out has to back out onto Elm Street pointed towards Bloomfield Avenue. How does the cue from the traffic signal affect the ability of the truck to back out that way?
I think the queue is going to be over the yellow line. It's going to be tight. They're going to have to. It probably will have some impact, but that is the larger vehicle. That is only if everybody moves out every year, it's not the smaller vehicles such as regular everyday deliveries.
Refresh my memory. Is there an on-site building superintendent? Is there somebody
Yes.
inside at all times?
Yes, there will be.
So could that be someone that could arrange or schedule larger vehicles into this loading area, including assist in backing trucks in and out?
Yes, Joe, that's typically how it is accomplished. There's an appointment made for a delivery for somebody to move into an apartment, and then they do that at with the building management, and they would take into consideration when was the most appropriate time.
And just one more question. On the, I guess the lane going north on Elm Street, right opposite the building, they're parking there? Not in front of the building, on the northbound lane. Yeah, around there.
I don't believe there's any parking that close to, I didn't really look at the other side. I was looking more at parking on our side of the street, but there is space. We're not right up against it. So if there is parking in that vicinity near the intersection, I would be surprised.
There's the Firestone driveway, and then before the Firestone driveway, there's parking for the retail that's across the street.
There's only about 3 spaces right there on the northbound side, and in front of Noches, it's all loading zone. It's no parking spaces.
But I think the answer is there are some spots before you get to the driveway for Firestone, which conceivably it's hard to visualize, but this building, if you're backing up a truck, you have to think of the oncoming traffic. You have the lane narrows because you have parking on the other side. And then it's a busy street and the light stops people, the queue. It just sounds like a mess.
Yeah, I think Mr. Cook is correct. I'm looking at the Google Maps. There's 3 spots there for parking. So there's going to be parked cars that they're going to have to navigate.
All right, if I can move on to my next exhibit, unless there's further questions about this.
Which one?
Which is exhibit 61, please.
Or page 61 from the PowerPoint, right?
Yes, that's correct. So one of the questions was, what is the available site distance for this project? And so I looked at the design speed of the roadway, and I believe I had it as 30. I forget what I have as, but it's 280 feet in each direction. The line that goes to the south on Elm Street does not go through any parking spaces. It's all in the yellow curbed painted area. So there is that visibility of 280 feet, which meets the requirements of, let's see, what organization I used, the FHA site distance for 25 miles an hour. And that range is 155 to 280 feet. So it's the upper limit of a 25 mile an hour design speed. Obviously to the north, it's from a signalized intersection where people could likely be stopped, but they can see past the light. So site distance, or I believe what was asked was a site triangle, which I don't know, makes a lot of sense because it's all the building is all the way to the front property line, so there's no opportunity for a site triangle easement, but the site distance in both directions conforms with the design speed of the roadway. So,
Okay. I think we already covered everything in the Boswell report, between your comments and Mr. Sionis's comments, and the understanding that we would comply with all of the comments in that report, subject to the, the testimony that's been provided. So maybe you can move on and put on your planning hat and discuss the variances that are being sought as part of this application.
I will. Thank you.
I have another question.
Okay.
We've talked about that the civil engineer would address snow removal if you go with the
Okay.
open format. How's that going to work?
It's laborious. They basically shovel it out and remove any large amounts of snow. If some are left in the garage, in any areas, it'll have to melt and go into the floor drains in the garage.
They shovel
we-
snow
we
out,
have
and
the-
where do they put it?
They shovel it and remove it from the site. I have several other urban projects that have this design. I don't know how I personally wouldn't want to do it, but it's a fairly common design in terms of having snow removal from the garage by the maintenance personnel on an ongoing basis.
And does that become problematic if all the cars are already parked there? How do they get around to remove snow?
Well, if the car's already there, next time they go out, the snow goes with them, but, or it goes, they just sweep it off to the space. It does become problematic with snow removal. In terms of the alternates, we actually felt good about the concept of putting a patio over that area. That obviously changes the variance from a parking setback variance to a building setback variance. But if the board was inclined to go that way, I think it makes a lot of sense in terms of having that. It also adds more building security. Even though you have a wall in the back, the 3.5 feet, people could jump over it and get into the garage. I just like the concept that was presented, or alternate that was presented, that we have some type of roof or patio over top of that area. But again, that's just it's really, we're willing to do it both ways. The one way with the snow removal is an ongoing laborious thing, but it's doable. It's ongoing maintenance. But the other would be a better solution.
Just with respect to the snow removal, Paul, we're only talking about 10 feet along the rear where there would be snow.
Yeah.
Going on to, right? Okay.
Correct.
How many
Correct.
cars?
It's not the entire garage.
How many
And,
cars?
I think there's 8 or 9 cars back there.
Yeah.
And there is a corner spot they could shovel some of the stuff too, but, but by and large, they have to remove a lot of it, particularly on really heavy storms.
When you say
And
removed off-site, which is not unusual, to have to
Yeah.
truck it to another location?
Correct.
So a dump truck comes,
Yeah.
a front
It's-
loader
it's-
comes and
It's,
picks
no,
up the
it's
snow,
handwork.
puts it in a dump truck?
It's handwork. Somebody with a shovel and wheelbarrow or something like that. It's just, they just have to get it out. If there's easier way, I'm not sure of it. I don't do building, operations.
Paul, why can't they just shovel it, move it to the landscaped area in the easement?
There's small areas in the left and right side that can be used.
I mean, if you look on the screen, this whole green landscaped area here, where you either have grass or you're gonna have low,
Yes, they can do that too.
if you need to take it out of the garage, that would be, to me, seemed to me a perfect place to store it.
Yeah, yeah, this is only the last 10 feet in the garage. If they have to shovel it out, they could certainly bring it over there too. But to get it out of the garage, it's all handwork. So we're not gonna bring in a backhoe and do that kind of thing.
So I have another question. Are we done with
Mhm.
snow? I guess we are. So my next question is about the staging of the contractor's large equipment when this building, if it were to be constructed, and where all the contractors are going to park during the construction phase. Where do they put the big, huge machinery, and where do they put the parking for the contractors? How's that going to happen?
That's a good question. I don't know that I have an answer for you because whoever they hire to build the job, they have, I can't dictate their means and methods of construction, but the town can indicate what can and can't be done in terms of where vehicles are parked, streets closed, and so forth. And so that has to be worked out with your construction department, between the contractor that's selected and the construction department.
You don't think it's a problem when you have people who are going to be doing construction, all these contractors, where are they going to park? So,
Yes, but there's plenty of inner city buildings that are built and they figure out a solution and that works for that city. And I'm sure that they can do the same for Montclair.
Yeah.
You guys have you still have a lot of buildings being built in downtown and Bloomfield Avenue, and they all seem to be progressing. They came up with a plan and we will do the same for this.
This is a tight squeeze, though, between two existing structures or facilities. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, I don't know if there's any other
Okay.
questions on the engineering aspect. Maybe you can go on and talk about the variances.
Okay, so we have several variances that we're currently requesting. The first being section 347-101. There's a number of parking spaces. You've heard testimony that it is a variance for one parking space. You also have testimony from your parking consultant and a report from your parking consultant that indicates that 37 to 47 spaces is the appropriate number. So we are right in there with actually the number that we're providing. We're 49, in reality we're 44. Physical spaces, there's actually 37 cars using the site, then we are right in the zone where your parking consultant has recommended. Part of his recommendation, I'm assuming this is what I've experienced too, is that buildings that are constructed in close proximity to mass transit, and we're in close proximity to the train station and buses. People that live in those apartments generally do not have the number of cars and have the parking demand that other apartment buildings away from mass transit do. These people tend to walk more. It's actually the beauty of the location of this is you can walk to so many things from this building, including all the downtown area and the train station and so forth. So it's not unusual to have a parking requirement for these type of units within walking distance of 1 to 1.5 spaces per unit. And if you use the 1.5 number, the upper end of that, and you multiply by the 22 units, and you add on the requirement of 1 per 250 for the office space, all simultaneous, you get 37 spaces. So I think, that's a fairly logical way to see how that's constructed. Now, if you also add on to that, that the timing between office parking spaces and residential spaces is different, and there's not a lot of overlap, then you have even a really lesser demand than the 37. So we are providing the 44 spaces in this physical spaces, and we have the EV parking credits that come back, which makes it actually 49 compared to the 50 required. So I think that the number of parking spaces is appropriate. It sounds like there might be it's only one space. And I've heard the comments regarding the right combination of people owning compacts versus full-size cars and whether they fit and so forth. However, I think the demand is much less than the ordinance currently requires in this particular case. So I think that the detrimental impact of the relief requested for the number of parking spaces is really very minor. I think we have the right number with this, even with the unit mix that we have. I think that it's a minor deviation. The second variance is section 347-83C, number 1, for the parking spaces being set back less than 4 feet from the property line. This really applies to the parking spaces only on the western side of the building where the overhang is. The purpose of the 4 feet traditionally is to have an area that can be planted for a buffer between the subject property and the adjacent property. And so there's a couple things that are in play here. Number one is that this parking lot is lower than the property next door, and there's the retaining wall. So the visual impact from this parking in this area is really de minimis. You won't be able to see the parking from the adjoiner. There'll be a 3.5-foot wall, extends above grade on the opposite side and 3.5 feet below grade, for a total of 7 feet, which is conforming in height for the wall. And so with regard to, and then the second thing is the adjoiner is the parking lot for the next door neighbor. So you're really not putting parking next to somebody's window that they're looking down at the cars. So again, with this relief that we're requesting, the deviation has a minimus deleterious impact to the adjoiners. The next variance is section 347-102A, that all parking spaces are connected to a paved aisle. This is primarily the variance relief for the tandem parking spaces, because the interior space is not directly connected to a parking aisle. And as was testified, is that these parking spaces would be dedicated to people who were users of one unit, so that they could back out just like they back out of their driveway in a single family home solution, where you can just back out and move and let your partner leave. So again, that those locations, which are minor, do not have a significant impact in terms of variance relief. The next is a design waiver, I believe. Let's see, it's 347-83B, number 4, rear yard 10-foot required. The main building is 10, but if we do go for the roof, or if the board is inclined to suggest that the roof is the way to go, then this would be the alternate variance where the roof went to the property line and would not have the setback to the adjacent property. If we just consider the application that's in front of us with the wall and the exposed parking, then this would not be an impact. But with this variance, though, in terms of the impact to the adjoiners, it's up against the adjoiners' parking lot. It's only the 12-foot lower level that is sticking up. It's not 5 levels of parking that requires a setback relief. So again, it's a minor consideration. The next is a design waiver. It's section 281-9B for the 9x18 parking spaces where 9x19 is required. And this is a fairly standard space size, and this variance is routinely granted. There is very little detrimental impact to granting 9x18 space as a design waiver. Does not have a substantial impact to the ability to park. Similarly, the design aisle width with the plan section 281-9D, 24-foot aisle is required, and we have 23 feet and 21 feet, and this was testified in by our traffic engineer that these are repeat users, and they'll be able to navigate their parking spaces from the familiarity that they have with the garage and the minimus reduction of 1 foot in the compact space area and 1 foot in the regular parking space area is not going to have a significant impact. This, as you can see, I'm heading towards a C2 variance proof for this, for the minor variances that we have. In terms of the overall project, I think if you look at the positive criteria, it satisfies many, it has many positive attributes. You have an existing building on site that is outdated. It's approximately 100 years old. It's it's an older building that does not necessarily fit the neighborhood any longer. It has a requirement, is by my rough calculations, for 25 parking spaces, and it really doesn't have any. It has an alleyway that it can go down the side for people to park in, and around a little bit around the back. But there's no formal parking lot that you would have, or the number that you would require. And so you'll be getting rid of a building like this, and you're going to replace it with a very attractive building that is conforming in use that's required in the zone. The densities are required in the zone, the height that's required in the zone, and it provides adequate parking. Maybe not the exact number, but it does provide adequate parking. So it also advances the purpose of the C1 zone. In your master plan, you have the purpose of the C1 zone. It says, for the purpose of encouraging the revitalization of the central business district in the township of Montclair, the C1 central business district zone. So the long-term, the purpose of this C1 zone was envisioned to encourage revitalization. And this is, by definition, the revitalization of this section, this property, by removing the old and building something new. It also advances the township goals as outlined in the master plan to ensure a variety of land uses and transportation modes that pursue a balanced mix of activities and vibrancy. This is a building that, as I mentioned, is in within walking distance of both downtown and trains. So it's something that gets away from reliance on automobiles, and that is in a town that has the geometry of Montclair. That's not a possibility in some of the northern and southern sections where you can't necessarily walk to all these things, but you can in the downtown, and this is an additional use that will ensure that variety is not just what you have with your single family homes throughout the rest of the community. The second part of the township goals that it furthers is a generate and nurture dynamics that support economic viability. With more people living in the downtown area within walking distance to all the shops and restaurants, it can certainly help to support the economic viability of the downtown area, particularly this far east in town, which, is not had as much redevelopment as other parts of the downtown area.
Mr. Anderson, excuse me, we live here, we know a lot of that. We live here, we all know that stuff. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be disrespectful, but,
I'm just giving you planning proofs of what it addresses, what you already know.
we
But I
all
just
know
wanted
that.
to remind you as part of this testimony and that it meets these goals. All right, so it also advances the master plan objectives of optimizing access options for each business district. Certainly, having people walk, it optimizes their access. It strengthens the community center as economic subcenter of the township by focusing on unique market niches and inherent in each district. So it certainly strengthens the neighborhood commercial by having greater population within walking distance.
Well, I don't want to stop you there, but want to talk a little bit about the purposes of zoning that would be advanced, under the C2 criteria.
Yes, okay. I could jump to that. So if you go to, it also advances purposes of zoning and MLUL. Purpose A, to promote the appropriate land use of land, which is a permitted use by the zone, the permitted density. And so this goes to the general welfare by allowing the development of the property with the appropriate use. Purpose of zoning E, to promote the appropriate population density, and we certainly do meet that with this project. And purpose of zoning I, which promotes the desirable visual environment, is a beautiful building that will replace the outdated buildings that's now, like I said, is out of place. And with all these items in terms of what they advance purposes of the master plan, and this is the purpose of the zone and the MLUL, they far outweigh any of the minor detriments that are created by the minor relief that's requested on those number of variances. And so it's my opinion that these variances can be granted without a substantial detriment to the zone plan, ordinance, or the neighborhood itself.
Okay.
Could I, before I have a question. As I'm looking at the zoning for central business zone, community area, it says that it discourages ground floor use that are automobile oriented with low customer turnover. That's discouraged. And it says it discourages any ground floor use which creates gaps in the retail frontage of a store or So I'm wondering about your first floor uses that, it's according to the central zone community area, that's discouraged. And it says that it encourages businesses that provide a wide variety of uses, mixed uses, both on the ground and upper floors. That it encourages educational and event spaces associated with the arts, that it encourages service-oriented businesses such as barber shops and beauty shops and educational and quasi-educational establishments, and that these are the kinds of things that are encouraged. To what extent does what you're doing with that particular space follow the intent of what is encouraged for a central business district?
Well, I think we're the community area of the central business zone, not the downtown area zone that those specific uses are.
No, this was referring to the community. There's the central, it's part of the central business district, and they have two types, and one is the central business zone community area. And I think we chose this as the community area. Is that the one that you're applying under? And these things that I read about what is encouraged and discouraged is coming from that, which describes the use in a central community area, downtown.
Well, it's not
business district.
automobile oriented, the parking itself, it's not an automobile repair or something like that on the first floor. So that's the way I interpreted the automobile oriented. It's not a repair shop. So
Well, I mean, automobile automatic is that is completely automobile oriented. It's all parking, is it not, pretty much?
for the
The
residents
use of the
only.
ground floor itself, the area of the ground floor where people are passing by, is that the idea is to create a shopping feel, that you're trying to bring in customers who are going to do the ground floor is supposed to encourage business. So I'm wondering if that is something, it discourages things which create a gap in the business so that people who are walking continue to shop. Right now what they've got is a gas station, and then they've got a automobiles supply store, then they've got a rug store, and that's followed by a juice bar, a place where they can, those are all business oriented. Is this building one which is encouraging the shopping in that area?
Yeah,
That's all I'm asking.
You're right. I think it's a bit of a transitional area within the zone where it is going from retail to more residential. You do have the restaurant, you do have the school and the car store across the street, but I don't think that the residential, which is the permitted use with the permitted density that we have, is precluded. I don't think it has to have the retail there. If it was right on Bloomfield Avenue, I think it would be a different story, but this is around the corner, and I don't interpret the automobile usage primarily as just parking for the other uses of the building, but I can understand how you can read it that way, but I don't see it that way.
What percent of the building would you say, if it's in the central business district, is encouraging business, is devoted to business? This is the central business district.
Yeah, it's just the office space is the use that is business oriented.
Okay, yes, it's just the office space. And what percent of that building would be devoted to business? What percent of the building is that?
I don't know the total floor area, so I can't tell you that. I know it's 1,100 square feet of office space. It's a minor element of the building. Primary use in this building is residential.
My math said it was something like 2.5%.
Because if it was bigger, they'd have needed more parking, and if it was less, they wouldn't be able to put the building there. Is that an accurate statement?
Pardon me? Could you say it again, please?
if there was a bigger office space, you would need more parking, and if it didn't have the office space at all, the building wouldn't be a permitted use.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You can break up the office space versus the number of apartments any way you want and still make it work within this building itself. This is the numbers that the applicant chose. He wanted to have a small office space and the 22 apartments.
I'd like to support what Carol was saying. Basically, the regarding the building composition per the zoning ordinance. Those Montclair zoning ordinance, section 34779C, differentiates the central business zone into two areas, the center area and the community area. And our project is in the community area. And the ordinance specifically says, in the community area of the C1 central business zone, a wide variety of local and regional shopping opportunities, which are both pedestrian and automobile oriented, are encouraged. In this area, a greater mix of uses on both the ground floor and the upper floors is encouraged. The application deviates from the intent and purpose of the usage described in this ordinance in that it provides no shopping opportunities within the building, nor does it have a greater mix of uses on both the ground floor and the upper floors. It is basically an apartment building with a very small amount of office space, allowing it to meet the technical definition of a mixed-use building, thus allowing it to skirt the more demanding front and side yard requirements of an actual apartment building. It does not, in my view, meet the intent and purposes of the zoning ordinance 347-79C. And just bear in mind, there's going to be, so we hear on Gates Avenue, a new building there, which potentially and likely has a restaurant on the ground floor. That's right around the corner. You have the Greek Taverna that has a restaurant, that is a restaurant with other uses on the upper floors. And you have now, I've just learned tonight that the gas station is for sale. I wonder what that's going to be. So this is a merging district that is kind of conforming to the intent of the community area of the C1 zone. So I would refute what you were saying, Mr. Anderson.
That this is a permitted use?
No, it is a permitted use, but in terms of the intent and purpose of the way the ordinance is written, you're just trying to, well, the building conforms with if it has these variances, but it doesn't have the ground floor retail space. It doesn't have anything but apartments on the upper stories. It's not what was intended, I believe, for this area of the town as you look at the definition of a community area of the C1 central business zone that both Carol and I are describing.
Mm-hmm.
But the use is permitted. I mean,
It's permitted,
clearly permitted.
right?
And yeah, you might prefer different uses there, but the ordinance clearly allows for this use.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Trembula, did your client own this property, or is it if this gets approved, he'll purchase the property?
He's under
It's on spec.
He's under contract to purchase the property.
Yeah, and just as a matter of information for my colleagues, I think, and you might know this was purchased about in 1995 for $100,000. So this, and there's no hardship to the developer if he has to walk away from this. He's paid just the cost, I guess, for these kind of hearings. But I'm sure that the owner will still make money if he builds something smaller. Anyway, I'm running out of juice here. I gotta go. You're probably glad.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's getting late.
Well, I have no further questions for Mr. Anderson.
And what about the rest of the board? Are there further questions?
If we wrap up, would someone be able to bullet point the exact variances? They were gone through in maybe not sequential, but just very simply say a variance for this, variance for that. Because I know that there was some discussion about the rear yard setback. I don't know if a decision's been made on whether the overhang is going to hang out there or not. So I would like to know exactly what the variances are that are being requested.
Yeah, we will pin that down
Thank you.
when we get to that. So again, are there any questions from the board, further questions of this witness? Are there any questions from the public of this witness concerning what he's testified to this evening?
Okay, I'm going to unmute everybody from the public, and if you have a question or for this witness, please raise your hand. And turn on your microphone. I don't see any.
Okay. All right, Mr. Tremolak, no further witnesses, right?
No further witnesses.
Okay. I know we have at least one person who wants to make a comment about the proceeding. It's almost 11 o'clock. And I, for one, am not really prepared to vote on this evening. I need to really think about some of the things that have been said this evening. And I believe that we need to have, based on the discussion that's already taken place, I'm sure we all have further needs to discuss elements of this application. I would propose, however, that since we have at least one member of the public who wants to be heard with respect to this application, that we allow the public to speak now before we adjourn and carry this to the next meeting. So if the rest of the board is good with that, I see shaking heads. Everybody.
I'll even say out loud I'm good with it.
Okay. So if we'll open up the floor now to the members of the public to allow them to comment on the application. When we resume the meeting at the next hearing, we will allow Mr. Tremolak the opportunity to sum up. And then we will thereafter begin our deliberations and discussions concerning where we're going with this. All right, so Janice, if you can open up to the public.
And yes, it's open, and I believe we have Mr. Schwartz who wants to make a comment, and anybody else, you are unmuted right now. Either raise your hand or unmute your microphone.
Am I unmuted?
You're unmuted.
All right, give me a second to get to the other page. It's difficult to Zoom. Gotta love it. All right. Okay. All right, members of the board, Mr. Tremolak. I heard Council Tremolak's position the other week at the earlier hearing that the applicant is only required to accommodate the actual zoning of this site. And I want to dispute that interpretation and address this legal issue here. I call the board's attention to the appellate division case, the Superior Court Law Division of Michael Moynihan versus Township of Teaneck Planning Board. In this appellate case, the court agreed that the township board there at issue did not provide appropriate references to town codes to warrant a denial of variances being sought. But the appellate court also specifically noted that neither party involved cited provisions of either the master plan on which the township relies on or the specific language of the zoning ordinances to support either granting or denying the application at issue. There, it was variances for a subdivision. So in effect, the appellate court's ruling there, extrapolated here, gave actual credence to both the master plan and the zoning code as legitimate factors for decision-making to approve or deny a project. Not just the zoning code, as Mr. Tremolak advocated, but the master plan as well, according to this appellate court ruling. So given this, I believe the planning board is not required to or encouraged to provide any variances here whatsoever if that proposed building at issue is not in keeping with the underlying goals of our master plan. And I believe both the scale, bulk, and exterior design detailing of this project, the metal and glass materials being shown, to the extent shown, is in opposition to goal number 4 of the township's master plan section, where the township goals are described in section 1.4 of the master plan. And the stated goal is to encourage public realm and private development that maintains the scale and character inherent in the diverse and historic neighborhoods of the township. As good as an architect as Mr. Sionis is, I think this building is out of character, out of scale, and not appropriate. In section 1.5 of the master plan, this building also deviates from that section and violates one of the stated objectives there. Number 12 of that section in 1.5 states that the objective is to promote and protect existing residential character and form in established neighborhoods. And I believe this project does not do that. And you can also see the same and similar description of goals found in the sections noted on page 82 of the master plan and for the Montclair Center that planning board member Carmel Lockman brought up at the last meeting. And I believe she was stopped, but I think she was correct, because it's very clear that this project, again, in scale, design, and materiality, as confirmed by Mr. Sionis' own testimony, does not keep with the character of its immediate surrounding neighborhood buildings, both right across the street and catty-cornered right there, which are more traditional brick, commercial, and classical residential buildings. Therefore, this project does not adhere to those master plan sections. That's because it's in a location that virtually borders the Montclair Center downtown historic district on Bloomfield Avenue, and its rear is directly behind and faces the historic livery building. So again, we're right across the street from Lackawanna Plaza, which is designed using classical materials and traditional architecture. The new building, given Mr. Sionis' description as eclectic, is right across the street. And while that may be appropriate for another setting, it's out of character right here and will degrade that historic site and the historic border area neighborhood by proximity. There are no other eclectic type buildings in this area. The building is also considerably higher than the immediate surrounding structures. The current approved plan for the Lackawanna Plaza project, as approved by this board, not what's coming, but as currently approved, the zoning plan approved, is 3 stories, again, from Bloomfield and Grove up to Glenridge Avenue. Again, that has a classical reproduction design. And so while this new building does technically adhere to the zoning code, that's only because the township council failed to fully consider and pass more protective zoning recommendations that were made by this board, which would have put the lot into another zone to adhere to the scale right there. As we heard at the last meeting, those recommendations to change the zoning here were directly suggested by this body now over 2 years ago. So shame on our township council, both Robin Schlager and Mayor Spiller in particular, 2 members of this board themselves, for not fully protecting our residents to pass those modified zoning recommendations, which this board suggested. That would have directly impacted and reduced the bulk and height of this project today. And as 2 members of the planning board and the advisors to their council, they have just dropped the ball and failed, really, as land use leaders to address the gentrification and overdevelopment issues here, which many residents have expressed great concern about, and which this building unfortunately only further advances. Both the mayor and Councilor Schlager were on the last town council elected, and their team still comprise the holdover majority votes on the new council today. They're the ones who should have known best and should have pushed other councilors to reduce the zoning heights right here in the downtown, which would directly impact this project and likely others coming. We just heard the gas station is now up for sale. It would have impacted that zoning too, but they did not focus, they didn't understand or see the importance of protecting our residents. So it's actually incredible for Council Schlager today, as she did before, to say that she believes there is too much density and bulk with this project, when both she and the mayor and council could have done something about it 2 years ago in the 2016 session to reduce the building heights as proposed. And even during this 2020 council session over the last year and a half, when she and the new council took office, yet she and the mayor sought no action. And this building bulk and density is the direct result. So our governing body still remains immobilized about this and about historic preservation guidelines to further limit heights and limit the density. But let's address this particular building here, because the blame for this building size falls directly on Mayor Spiller and Councilor Schlager as members of this body and the council for not correcting the zoning tonight. Nonetheless, this building exterior does not reflect and complement the overall neighborhood scale and the character here as specifically called for in the master plan. So there's no reason to provide the applicant with any variances whatsoever unless and until the building works better within its setting. I just cited the specific master plan sections relating to the township goals, section 1.4 and 1.5. These can be used as the technical basis for denial. So I urge the body to deny the application unless and until the applicant puts this building more appropriately for the neighborhood in both its scale, design, character of the immediate surrounds. Thank you.
Mr. Schwartz, this is Arthur Neese. Do you have a citation for the Moynihan case that you?
I do, Arthur. It's Monahan against Township of Teaneck Planning Board, docket number A-2239-18T4. It was decided on May 8th, 2020. It's unpublished. I can give you the Westlaw site if you want it.
I won't need it. Thank you, Jeff.
Gotta love you, Jeff. I had it right here. Thank you for pulling that up.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. I think we have at least one other person who wants to speak.
I'll go, yeah. Thanks. My name is Gregor Clark. I live at 18 Gates Avenue. I really appreciate the work that this board is doing. And it's been really a great civic pleasure to just attend these meetings and wait for a chance to speak. So thank you for the work that you're doing. I want to urge you to deny this application. Just says some context. We live. I live directly behind 24 Elm, and when I moved here, my wife and I, we knew the building that was coming. We understand the delicate blocks that we live on, the transitional nature of this neighborhood. This project seems to so willfully disregard this community. It's sort of astounding to watch it unfold over these 3 meetings, with a kind of, and I'm sure each of these team members are, have integrity, but it's just, it seems like there's kind of a sense of just not telling the right story. When Mr. Sionis consistently describes, and Mr. Anderson, the parking lot behind the site, actually, on Arbor Gate, residents gather in front of their apartments on both sides of that building. And it's not just a parking lot. It's also precisely where they have, those residents, a small outdoor space. But that doesn't really fit the narrative. So it's just repeatedly described as a parking lot in a way that seems to, for me, as someone who's not an expert in this, just kind of reflect a sort of community disregard throughout this application. Or Mr. Trembulak mentioned in the first meeting that a reason to justify the project was the amount of money that the developer was willing to spend on the project. That has nothing to do with this community. That's actually completely irrelevant, whatever he wants to spend. The building stretches into every corner of that plot and is far too large. My family has not spoken about Lackawanna Plaza. We did not speak about the application down the street on Gates Avenue. We didn't speak about the building that was built behind us. We are very understanding of where we moved, and we appreciate the balance that we live in this district and this particular block. But this building, immediately we knew we had to speak out against it because it is completely out of character for this community. The elevations don't show 1 Union Street consistently in these presentations. They're there if you go into the application. That's a house. You know, all up Union Street are houses. Where we live is a house. And while these are often R2, the majority of them are lived in by single families now. The character is changing here. Where the misrepresentation this evening by Mr. Trembulak of the location of Bullock School, it is across the street. It's not a block away. You know, just to not know this application is so stunning. And in fact, you know, another piece of this, when Ms. Dolan was talking about the school traffic, the reality of the school traffic is in fact that there's a very advanced traffic flow plan that would perhaps have been an advantage to this applicant if you knew what it was, but you didn't look into that. In fact, all the traffic flows to the other side of the school on the east side. But the fact that over the course of 3 meetings, a traffic analyst and the engineer just weren't able to actually represent that accurately, to me reflects a disregard for this community in this application, and perhaps an inadvertent selfishness around just what could happen. I find the representation of the building codes and the master plan to just feel disingenuous. You know, this small office, like, what does it actually represent to this community? Where's the integrity in this building? It just seems absent to me. And I understand that there are some design features that are impressive, the roof, you know, that's great. And Mr. Sionis, you designed some lovely buildings in this town, and I'm aware of them, and I appreciate the work that you do. This seems completely out of character for where we live. And I just had to speak out against the size of this building. It's just not appropriate for this neighborhood. And we're very pro-development, and appreciate that the role in part of this planning board is to find that balance between what a community is and what a commercial area is. And this block is so specific to that balance, and this application is just not appropriate. So I urge you to reject these requests. And I urge the project team to understand that you're creating a building that's not appropriate for this site, and to reconsider what you're applying for, and to make it more in the character of the community that lives here. It feels to me like the whole team is just looking north, and I want you to look south, because south is where we live. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, the person who just spoke lives on Gates, and directly in their backyard is 24 Elm Street, correct?
That's right.
Okay, yeah, and 24 Elm is how many stories? That's only 4?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
but
thank you.
if you look at the elevations, I mean, it's dwarfed by this application.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public wish to be heard?
I don't see any other hands. And nobody
Okay.
else has turned on their microphones.
Okay. All right, everyone. Janice?
I just have a question for you, John. That does not question. So is the hearing still open to the public for comment when we meet again?
No, the hearing is not still open to the public. You know, I think if people wanted to be heard on this, they would have been here this evening. And of course, nobody really knew that this was going to go on to another meeting. And in all fairness, I don't think that it's necessarily fair to give another opportunity to people who have not been following along with this, who haven't shown up to the meetings. And I think that in order to be fair to the applicant, that we are allowing him to go at the next meeting because I think we're all tired now. And we're not going to have very much patience for what Mr. Tremulak has to say, just because we're tired. Nothing personal, Mr. Tremulak, but just because we're tired of listening to stuff at this point. And we so I'll giving him the opportunity to make his closing comments at the next meeting. And
I just have
that would be, Janice.
January 24th.
Okay, you will be the first thing on the agenda. And we will, after Mr. Tremulak gives his closing remarks, that will be the board's opportunity to sit down and discuss where we're headed with this.
So, Mr. Chairman, I just have a question about, well, just ask it. I don't think I have a handle on what our options are. And I don't know whether it's appropriate for me to ask that Mr. Neese tell us what our options are, or somebody else tell us what our options are, you know, sort of agnostically.
I think you can talk to Mr. Neese individually
Okay.
about what applies here. If other members of the board have questions, specific questions, legal questions that they want to ask Mr. Neese, I think that they can individually contact Mr. Neese. We are not permitted to discuss the application amongst ourselves, between now and the next meeting.
But can Mr. Neese share that information? If anybody has questions, can he share it with the rest of us? So that we're all on the same page with our understanding?
Art?
I don't see any reason why I couldn't. And as long as I provide the information to the applicant through Mr. Tremulak, I don't see any detriment.
And
I'll give you a shout tomorrow, Art, and then you can do with whatever you tell me as you will.
And there's a couple of things that are outstanding that we'd like to see by the next meeting, right? We have the samples of the materials for the outside skin. We have the environmental report to be looked at by our consultant. And I'm curious if the engineer is going to come back and tell us if there's any underground streams nearby that would affect the project.
All of those things could be conditions also.
Right, we're not going to be able to have that, soil analysis.
Okay, well, my last thing was I'd like to see the actual hard copies of the December material that Mr. Sionis supplied.
I'll get that to you, Carmel.
Thank you. I'm happy to pick it up, actually. If you...
Mr. Tremulak, is there any issue with producing the environmental? I presume it was a preliminary environmental report.
I think it's a phase 1 report, and I have no problem providing that. I can probably get that out tomorrow.
That would be great. If you send it to me, then I'll send it on to Boswell, and maybe by the time of the next meeting, we can get a clean bill of health or otherwise.
Arthur, actually, I prefer to have it come through me.
That's fine.
Because I keep the official files for this, and I'll send you a copy.
That's fine.
I'll send, I can email, I'll send it to both Janice and Art, if that's okay.
Okay, good.
They both have it.
All right, anybody else have any issues or questions they want to raise at this juncture? If not, then I will thank you, Mr. Tremulak. We will see you here at our next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I don't believe we have anything else on the agenda, do we, Janice?
I think that's good, unless you want
to... Smartly paid the bills earlier, so...
Yes, we took care of that already. Thank you, Carmel.
You're going to bed.
So with that, I move that we adjourn the meeting, and thank you all for your participation. And,
Thank
you.
Happy New Year.
I feel better.
All right.
Thanks,
See you
everyone.
next time.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Bye.